All the second stage tanks now pressurized. Astronauts report it feels good. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk. I am your host, Hannah Wallen, here with a whole crowd of people, and I'm not going to try to introduce everybody individually today because we're going to be jumping in and out, and not everybody's here right now. But we're all here, including for part of the show, the Badger-in-Chief, Mistress of Misoggy Knees, Allison Tiemann, who's one of the people who's not here right now, to haunt your headphones with the latest graveyard dirt on our court case. But first, an announcement and some news. We are in the last stretch of our legal battle with the Calgary Expo and the Mary Sue. In April of 2015, we opened a booth at the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo with a conglomeration of Honey Badger Brigade merchandise, editions, and other items from, and merchandise from Allison's Xenospora comic, and an anti-censorship banner with the Gamergate logo as a tribute to Gamergate supporters who had helped fund our way to the Expo. The Expo expelled the group on the first full day of the event and publicly defamed Allison with an article published in the Mary Sue. With false accusations to rationalize the expulsion. Included in the public defamation was an article published in the Mary Sue and publicly referenced by the Calgary Expo's official Twitter account to explain the expulsion to attendees and fans who questioned the decision, and those accusations were picked up and repeated by several media sources following the incident. The brigade responded with legal action, filing claims in the Provincial Court of Alberta against Calgary Expo for injurious falsehood and breach of contract, and the Mary Sue for injurious falsehood and incitement to breach of contract. The history of that action can be seen in the Honey Badger Brigade blog post HBB Heading to Court in Calgary Expo case that was published as we were heading to court last January, and updated after the judge found in our favor regarding all of the opposition's objections and demands. After a year of impotent, petty, behind-the-scenes legal shenanigans from our opponents, our day in court approaches again. Our trial dates are November 28th to 30th. We will once again be transporting our key witnesses to the hearing in Alberta, Canada, from various cities and the U.S. and also from the U.S. and also from the U.K. We will need your help once again, so please go to our legal fundraiser at www.feedthebadger.com. You can also click on the I in the upper right-hand corner of this video to go directly to our legal fundraiser. With that, before we get into the news stories I had planned for tonight, it came to my attention minutes before the show that there has been another terror attack. This one near the World Trade Center. Let me see if I can make this fit in the window. No, it won't change perspective there. There we go.
So what are the technical difficulties now?
What technical difficulties? We're
My
broadcasting.
God, no.
Well, the technical difficulties are, Allison, that you are here again.
Oh my fucking God.
That is technically a difficulty for all of us.
There are no technical difficulties that I'm aware of. I looked. We are broadcasting.
All right. So the technical difficulty was me, as Karen has so eloquently informed us.
Okay.
There you go.
Apparently this thing has
representing
auto
thousands
start.
of Ohio doctors.
Auto start. No, I don't.
Well, I mean, there doesn't seem to be much information about the attack itself and the motivations and stuff, or anything really about the driver, other than he was holding imitation weapons when he jumped out of the truck.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, he drove down a bicycle path and mowed a bunch of people over. and then crashed and jumped out of the vehicle and brandished fake weapons, and then was shot by police. So that seems to be killed 8 people, injured a dozen or more others, I guess, or
and
a dozen others.
We don't know.
You know what this means? It means we need truck control and fake weapon control.
Absolutely. Well, you know,
don't we have both already?
Well, the fake weapons.
Tighter truck controls.
He probably took the little orange thingies off the ends of his fake weapons. Oh my god, dog!
Yeah, that's actually
Can you bring her down from the window?
You know, it's just the perfect night for it to happen too, because now that this has happened in Manhattan, you can guarantee that the cops are going to be, you know, like if anybody's dressed up like, I don't know, like a policeman or some other particular character that carries a gun, that's just going to be like a living hell for the policemen in Manhattan right now.
Well, I think honestly, if I was in Manhattan, I would be driving my kid to some other place, Staten Island or something like that, to go trick or treating, or to a mall somewhere. Let's go to the mall and go trick or treating there. You know, the Gap has good candy every year, you know, and so does I don't know, like Best Buy.
Yeah, just so. Make sure the Blues Brothers aren't angry also at this time.
Yeah.
Now that's graveyard humor. But hey, what better time for graveyard humor than Halloween? So that's all we know so far, basically, is what the news reports say. I'm not going to report on rumors. I'm getting people giving rumors in the chat. I'm not going to report on rumors. Let's wait until the actual information comes out. We know what we know. I will say this. Regarding this following Vegas, I predict that if this was an attack that they can't specifically immediately trace back to Islam, and it is not an attack that is racially motivated against a minority, if there's any evidence that it is a racially motivated attack against white people, or if it is an attack on the United States on patriotism and things like that by somebody who they can't immediately prove is an extremist of a religious variety, they will say, we can't figure out a motive. We don't know why this person did that. You know?
Well,
and that's what's going to happen.
Cuomo's already
even
said
if there's
that
evidence, yeah, because that's
Cuomo's
what happened
already
with Vegas.
said it's a lone wolf.
Yeah,
right?
There's been lone wolf attacks before. The Vegas attack was a lone wolf attack.
Yes.
And the Vegas attack specifically targeted country music fans. Okay, country music fans. The stereotype is white people. The stereotype is middle class. The stereotype is patriotic. The stereotype is they support the cops. They stand by the thin blue line.
And the
that's
military.
The stereotype, and the military, right? But you can't get the media to say that it was a targeted attack on white patriots, because that goes against a narrative. So whether or not we're going to get accurate reporting on this will depend on what motive this guy has. If the motive doesn't fit the media's political narrative, they will say, we can't figure out a motive. And you'll get Fox News giving a motive, and you won't get the mainstream media giving a motive. On the other hand, if the motive is, you know, the guy was right wing, or he was crazy and had a falling out with his ex-wife, or there was some other, you know, something like that happened, all of the news media will report on it. You'll see distancing from Fox News, but they'll still report on it. That's one of the reasons why I say, yeah, none of them are truly fair and balanced, but the right-wing establishment media sometimes is the lesser of two evils. They at least tell you what's going on, even if they don't tell you the full truth about it. But as far as the story itself goes, it's obviously another horrible situation, and our hearts go out to everyone that has been directly affected by this. And obviously the community is probably scared to go trick-or-treating right now. Like Karen said, I wouldn't have my kids out either just on the street in that area right now with this happening. The thing is, it's already 6 o'clock. It already's happened. There may be people that are out and haven't heard a word of this and wondering why everybody else isn't also out. So with
Be
that
careful.
though, yeah, I mean, you just have to be careful. You just can't, you know, and most people, I think these days, like when my kids were younger and they went trick-or-treating, it wasn't like when I was a kid where you could just go through the entire neighborhood. We went with them. They didn't go by themselves, and we went to houses that either we knew them or the woman that we knew when we moved to the community knew them. So we had, you know, we had at least a safer outlook there. We didn't just go around a neighborhood we didn't know or didn't have good information on. And there's probably a similar caution normally, I think, especially in New York, especially in the city, given that it's had its ups and downs with crime rates. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Well, with me, I mean, like, and here's the thing, right? You think that your neighborhood is, like, I thought that, you know, my neighborhood was, I mean, that the worst that was going to happen to any of my kids would be like someone would shake them down for, you know, the money in their wallet or their Halloween candy or whatever, right? Because it's just like there's certainly, it's not the nicest neighborhood, but it's relatively safe. But, you know, it was just a month ago, maybe a little bit more, that we had a truck of peace driven by an ISIS supporter. He actually, the first thing he did was it was Military Appreciation Day at the Edmonton Eskimo Stadium, which is just, it's very, very close to where we are. It's like maybe 10 blocks away. And within walking distance for sure. That he ran down a police officer. The car sent the police officer 15 feet in the air, and then the suspect got out of the car and began to stab the police officer, who actually was released from hospital that same night, if I recall. But this guy was just guiding traffic out of the stadium. It was right when when everybody was sort of coming out of the stadium. And the suspect ran off, got into a rented cube van, budget rent-a-truck or whatever, and drove downtown along the road that the stadium is on, which turns at the River Valley and heads up one of the main drags downtown, and started intentionally hitting pedestrians. And then eventually the van tipped over and police managed to like contain the situation. But I mean, like this is all happening, you know, within walking distance of my house. It would take me maybe half an hour to 40 minutes to walk downtown. Would take 10 minutes to walk to the stadium. And all of this is happening right there. So, oh my God. Oh, it's probably your dad, Rachel.
Well,
it's my daughter's birthday, so I'm gonna mute now while she talks. I was gonna
say that's a good time to mute. In this situation, it looks like we actually have the suspect has been taken into custody. So we actually have a living suspect, it sounds like, to find out exactly what was going on. They won't have to just go through his information afterward and speculate. They won't have to talk to his family and speculate. They will have the guy right there to say what he was doing and why. If, that is, he isn't going to try to cover his ass because he's going to be prosecuted. And if he doesn't find a way to commit suicide, which I would be really suspicious if that happened. And for anybody just coming in, this was Manhattan. This was the. It's not moving. God, there we go.
It was right near the trades, the World Trade Center Memorial.
That's right. Yeah, right near the memorial. So it's they're hitting, the God, I can't think of the word. Not hallmarks, but yeah,
landmarks.
It's one of those fun things about my brain. It does that. It like just, oh, you want this word? Well, I'm gonna hide it under a rock, and you won't find it until you're done with the conversation.
There you go.
And then they all pop out at once in the middle of your dreams.
Or when I'm trying to get to sleep. That's the best one when I'm trying to.
And so then you sit bolt upright in bed and you're like, Julian Assange! Fuck, that's who it was.
No. If I sit bolt upright in bed and say that, then I have a lot of explaining to do. Or any other guy's name. But no.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Oh my.
But okay, moving on.
Let's move on to the next story. We're gonna talk about counterfeit red pills. Now I'm gonna go back to our travel picture here, because I don't have a picture for this story. This is just kind of related to something much earlier in the year, but I'll just leave the travel picture up because we know that's coming up anyway, and it would be most appropriate if this chick was dressed like Dorothy, because that's how I feel when I travel. Like, I haven't been dropped in a foreign area as soon as I'm out of my neighborhood. So here we go. Counterfeit red pills. And this is written by Mike J. About a year and a half ago, all the way back to April of 2016, Candace Owens attempted to launch the website Social Autopsy. While it was initially described as an anti-harassment startup, listening to Owens' own words about the project revealed a more sinister motive. In a video introducing the concept of social autopsy, Owens stated, "We attach people's words to their places of employment, and anybody in the entire world can search them. What we are doing is figuratively lifting the masks up so nobody can hide behind, Twitter handles or privatized profiles." In essence, Owens wanted her website to be used as a doxing service, doxing being the act of publishing an individual's private information on the internet, usually with ill intent. Social Autopsy soon drew criticism from all sides of the internet. Even the likes of Zoe Quinn and Randy Harper condemned Owens' idea, with Harper even bragging that she shut down Owens' Kickstarter. Now, in the middle of this story, I'm going to make a point here. There is only one reason why these guys cared. They are notorious doxers themselves, so it's not opposition to doxing. They didn't want a weapon like that to be available on the internet that could be turned back against them. They only want one that's available if they have control of it. We saw opposition to this, not just from our side of the fence, but also from anti-Gamergate. Owens's funding was cut off. By the end of April, the situation had begun to fade from public consciousness. Owens's funding was cut off. The website itself existed in a half-built state, and Owens herself had gone quiet. Fast forwarding to summer of 2017, and Candace Owens was back in the public eye, but in a different way. After rebranding herself as Red Pill Black and sporting a new conservative outlook on life, Owens was making the rounds on places such as Fox News and InfoWars. Owens claimed that her run-in with Quinn is what pushed her away from being a liberal. Second point I'm going to interrupt with, that could be true. Then we're not actually, this is grain of salt territory, not an attack on Owens. But going on, however, not everyone was convinced. While it was old news by this point, people still remembered the failure of Social Autopsy and what Owens herself wanted to do with it. When confronted with this, Owens claimed that the website was never functional and only existed as a splash page. YouTubers Tree of Logic and Suit Yourself proved this to be a lie, noting that the easily exploitable website still contained still contained a working database, and that it was possible to submit information. Owens then doubled down on her claim, not only calling Tree of Logic a liar, but claiming she was paid to spread misinformation. Social Autopsy was pulled down for good shortly afterwards, presumably by Owens herself. Stranger still, Paul Joseph Watson of InfoWars has come out in support of Owens, calling the claims against her dumb, even though it was Watson himself who wrote an article a year ago for InfoWars decrying the idea of social autopsy. It seems the conservative wagons are now steadfastly circled around Owens. It's unclear what her motives may be, but what is clear is that her lies concerning her former website are enough to call anything else she may say into question. Now, this situation, I'm going to say... Oh, and we have a super chat. Ryan Field gave us $4.20 and says, HBR has no Dorothy pics. Send nudes. Problem solved. And General Jack Ripper gives us $5 and says, hi, Allison. Viewing stuff...
Sorry, was I mentioned?
Yes.
Was I mentioned?
You just said,
oh my
yes,
God. Okay,
hi,
hello.
And there's your hello back. Viewing Stuff gives us 10 pounds and says, I think it would be fascinating, quite possibly productive, if Allison had a one-on-one chat with Sargon. He'd probably be more receptive to her criticisms of the skeptic community than you'd think. And I think that's all of them.
I think that they're fine as they are. It's just that I don't think that ultimately what they're doing is really going to change anything, because I don't think they're actually challenging what needs to be challenged. I think they're very nice people. It takes a particularly stubborn, hard-headed, sort of, stupid in some ways type of person to actually go down this particular road. They're probably just too nice.
It's like Matt. I did 2 podcasts with a guy named Matt Orchard from New Zealand, I believe, that are up on my channel, and one of the things that he said was, okay, like I have written down what I believe your argument is about women and Islam, right, and gender issues in Islam, and you can tell me if I got it right. And he actually did a brilliant job of actually just crystallizing my thoughts on the topic. He steel-manned me, and he said something about, I would hate to start an argument about the oppression of women in Islam and then lose. Because he would. He actually told me at the start of the second one that this wasn't going to be a hardball thing. It was just more of an it was essentially what Cenk Uygur said that my interview with Cenk was going to be, which is an information expedition. And that's what he described.
What the fuck is that pretentious shit?
But okay, but whatever, right? He wanted to essentially discuss a few of the topics that we didn't. I mean, because for his degree, right, for his project for school, he proposed 50-50, 15 minutes softball, 15 minutes hardball, and he really screwed up on the hardball in that particular interview. But then, I invited him, come hardball me again, right? And he said, well, I would like to talk to you again. But, I know. But he didn't want to actually just do, 30 minutes or so of contentious, interrupting Chris Matthews style freaking interview tactics, or, Bill O'Reilly kind of thing. But he did say it would be very embarrassing if I started an argument about the treatment of women in Islam and I lost, and I know I would lose, right?
Is that what he said?
He essentially kind of said, he knew that I would be able to defend my position that women are not as hard done by under Islam as people believe, and that the story of women in Islam is only half of the story. And I think he absolutely was able to, say that if he was arguing the oppression of women in Islam with me, he wouldn't get very far. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is that. The other thing is that
Yeah, no, and
okay.
it's so,
I'm
I mean, like,
losing you guys for some reason. It is not coming through at my end, so don't anybody talk for a second because I'm
okay.
going to have to hang up and come back. I don't know why it does that.
I don't know. I don't know why it does that.
Everything. Okay, so like right in the middle of the last sentence you said, Allison, it just cut off. It cut you off entirely. And it sounds like Karen could hear you, but I couldn't, so you need to repeat whatever it was.
What I said? Well,
yes.
Actually, I got about 2 words in, and then Mike went in, and then Karen went in.
Okay, well, that's it then. It's Doc that I couldn't hear. It's Mike that I couldn't hear.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Mike, you got to repeat yourself.
Again. Maybe my interruption was what broke the internet.
No, it does this. It does this on the Thursday show too. It does it to who does it do? Well, it doesn't do it to Aiden. It does it to Prim.
Okay.
Every
well,
time she
do you want
mutes,
me to continue my thought?
No,
okay.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever.
Well, I just consider it instantaneous karma. Okay. Well. There is the argument, like the factual argument that Karen is really good at, about just laying out her case, showing the facts of the case, explaining where she's coming from, with all of the statistics, all of the evidence, etc. In my case, I think that we can't actually challenge what's happening to our society unless we challenge this notion it's like a thought virus that's creeped in, that there is class warfare between men and women, with men winning. It's making us destroy our society. So, I mean, on the one hand, there's the argument over whether or not women in Islam are oppressed relative to men. And then for me, there's the deeper argument of what this narrative is doing to our culture. And I would argue that what it's doing to our culture is it is destroying it. It's like an acid corroding our culture into nothingness, sort of a madness.
This is what, because Dave Rubin, when I went on Dave Rubin, he said, do you think the pendulum could possibly go too far in the direction that MRAs wanted to go? And I said, I don't think so. I don't think, even during the heyday of patriarchy, when women didn't have certain freedoms, didn't have certain rights, and were subject to, the authority of the men in their lives in certain ways. They had entitlements and protections and benefits that were all sort of arranged there and written, instantiated into law and custom to protect them from men who would abuse their authority, right? And so essentially we had this balancing, or an attempted balancing, of rights and entitlements and obligations between men and women, where, yes, women were in the inferior position in terms of autonomy, but they were in a superior position in terms of protection, right? And I don't think that it's possible for men to take things so far in the direction of men's rights that we actually begin oppressing women. That I think there is a limitation within men where they would viscerally feel like, this is biologically not possible for us to do this stuff to women, or to treat women more harshly than men are treated, or whatever, right? And then, he agreed. He said, it does seem biological. It does seem like we're programmed to protect women. It does seem like we're programmed to treat them better than we treat each other. And then, like 3 minutes later, he says, but what about Islam and women, and how women are really oppressed there? And I'm like, you just said biologically men are incapable of oppressing women. And now you're saying there's like 1 billion men out there, or 500 million men out there, who are somehow immune to this biological reality.
I think it's how they create the ability to, like, not in his particular case, but in general, it's the way of being able to kill another man. Because you basically ascribe the worst characteristics to him. And in this case, you ascribe the characteristics of hating his own women. But I wanted to just answer the specific question I would love to have a discussion with Sargon. I really enjoyed having the brief conversation I had with him in VidCon. He seems like a very genuine human being, and I don't mean this, this criticism to be like some, oh my God, you're so, and then also Mike has called me out on even using the term skeptic community, but whatever. Those people,
we're skeptical of skeptics, you see, which makes us, I don't know whether, yeah, it's just a weird terminology trick.
Regardless, there's sort of a community thing going on. And whatever you want to call them, that group of the individual people who are against feminism, but still think that feminism was the way or beneficial at some point throughout human history, at which I would disagree with. At least the feminist framing was not beneficial. And I would ascribe a lot to what we ascribe to feminism is more correctly ascribed to the labor movement and other groups that actually did the good things.
I want to address something that someone said in the comments, and I'm assuming that it's about that I said that there's something within men, sort of at the biological level, that would lead them to not oppress women. And he said that's not even slightly substantiated. Men can exercise control over women. I never said they couldn't, and haven't. What I have said, and what I have always said, is that there is no society in which men treat women more harshly than they treat each other. And you can even look into patterns of violence within relationships. They have found that violent men are more violent outside of their relationships with other men than they are with their intimate partners. Whereas with women, the pattern is the reverse. They are more violent within their intimate relationships than they are outside of them, against either men or women. So, and more violent with their children than they are outside of them. So essentially, I think that patriarchies take women's experience into account, and they actually acknowledge that women are in a subordinated position. And therefore, you can even see this in the fucking slave codes of England and France, for fuck's sake. Female slaves had protections that male slaves did not. They had exemptions from certain types of labor. They had protections from certain types of punishments that male slaves did not, right? And yes, I agree. Those laws, those codes were probably very sporadically enforced, but at least they were there, right? At least they were fucking there. And you can look at the fact that 2/3 of the slaves brought over to the colonies from Africa were men, and yet 2/3 of the slaves that survived the first generation in the colonies were women. You can look at the death rates going on there, and you can see that somehow the female slaves were surviving at a much higher rate than the male ones, right? And so
they also had these protections.
They had these protections written into law, and they probably had informal protections written into people's fucking wetware, right? That it's taboo biologically to kill women. Like it's just something that meant, and like Allison said, the ability to see other men as the enemy, and the fact that our men talk about the men that they see as an enemy, and they say they are so awful, they hurt their own women, right? That is what our men say about Muslims. And what do you think Muslim imams are saying about Western men? They are so awful, they sexually exploit and mistreat and dishonor their own women, right? They force them to show their flesh. They force them to degrade themselves sexually. They force them into all of this stuff. That's what those men in the West do with their women, right? And that's how they demonize us. Okay,
well,
so don't fucking tell me that patriarchies don't take into account the treatment of women.
Well, duh, you has a vagina, so obviously you should be protected. It's misogyny.
even in like those other cultures, there's how you're supposed to beat your significant other, right? Where does that come from?
There's limitations placed on you. And, like in the articles of Iranian family law, where, it's those are all based on Sharia, right? And I read them start to fucking finish. And there's one phrase that struck me as absolutely freaking telling, right? If the situation in the household is such that the wife, that there is significant risk to the wife of physical or financial injury or injury to her dignity, she may set up a household separate from her husband at his expense and be kept by him in that separate household, including servants if she has grown accustomed to them, until such time as the situation in the household has resolved itself.
Okay. And then again, there's also the overarching problem is that this idea that class warfare between men and women with men winning, any conservative...
Men aren't fighting class warfare. It's feminists who are fighting class warfare against men.
Yes. But
it's taken 150 fucking years for men to actually stand up and say,
all right, hold on.
Could you ladies stop hitting us?
That's the thing. If you're in a situation where somebody is hitting you, this is the way society has defined it for a very long time. That's why we have self-defense laws. You are considered to be in a fight if someone hits you, and you have to do anything to stop them, even if it's just say, don't do that. So if you want to call it class warfare because men have had to say don't do that, then that's appropriate. But let's let Allison finish what she was going to say, because I think it sounds like it's going to be a very important point, and we're all going to miss it.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, let's see if I can remember it now. All right. My point is this idea of class warfare between men and women, with men winning. It leads to a particular attitude in our society that is untenable. It's basically destroying our society. And the reason why is this. When looking through history and understanding historical perception or historical reality, psychological reality, it has come to my awareness or conclusion that women in a social role socially function to connect men's instincts to the greater work of society. So men have these set of instincts to provide and protect for their women. What women do is they take those instincts, they develop an identity, and capture those instincts through developing an identity, and then that identity serves the work of creating a society. And they do that by raising their sons in a particular way, with particular morals, with particular stories. These are the heroes. These are the villains. These are the goals that you need to strive for. These are the goals that you don't strive for. These are the people outside of your group. These are the people inside your group. And that process ties men's instincts to protect and defend and provide for women into a social narrative that creates a society. Now, what this idea of class warfare between men and women with men winning does to our society is it's basically telling the men and the boys who are biologically created to protect and provide for women that their actions are creating a society that hurts and harms or hurts and leaves women out in the cold. So, in other words, their actions are functioning to destroy what they've instinctively primed to protect and provide for. So, what is that going to do to our society when we say that our society is in a war against women, to the people who uphold our society and through their actions? And this is statistically true. You got rid of men tomorrow, and the gross domestic product, the amount of taxes coming in, would be put the U.S. immediately into the red, because the group of people that are the largest providers would be gone. And all that would remain are the group of people who are the largest consumers. So it would collapse instantly. So you take your most productive people and you tell them that the people that they're being productive for, they're actually hurting by being productive. and you wait, and all of society basically destroys itself in the process. And I think that's what we're seeing. And the first red flag of this is, of course, when you tell a group of people who are instinctually primed to protect and provide for women that their actions actually, that their presence and their actions are creating overall destruction of women, harm of women, a war against women, oppression of women. They're hurting women. The first red flag that you see is what? Those people killing themselves. And that's the first red flag we see in the statistics, and it's around the 60s and the 70s. The rate of male suicide starts to go up because now, instead of tying their instincts with a narrative that makes them feel like they're producing a society that's healthy, that's like, you know, prior to the 50s, that we thought our society was a good thing. We thought it was providing us prosperity. It was creating greater security and peace. Now we think it's a patriarchy that oppresses women. At those times, even though men may have been exploited by society, they were at least being told that exploitation was creating something positive for women, which was providing them a benefit in terms of their instinctual drives. Then they were being told that it wasn't, and they started to kill themselves. And that's the first red flag. The next red flag is that you have all of these young men who are completely lost because they've been told all of their lives that their actions create a system that harms and starves the people that they are biologically key to provide for and protect. So they just unhook themselves from the system because they're just basically numbed into a state of inability with this punishing narrative. And so they unhook themselves from the system. So they stop working. They stop doing anything. They start spiraling into depression. So you have the men who are killing themselves, and then you have the men who are checking out because of this narrative. And remember, we're talking about the group of people who are the producers of society. And our society is busy getting them out of it, like just destroying their ability to produce, their ability to conceive of themselves as doing something positive through production. And then you have the men who are so shamed by this narrative that their actions produce horrific results. They oppress women, who get addicted to social justice narratives. And the reason why they're getting addicted to that is because they feel so ashamed that they're driven to become a hero for a victimized group in order to soothe that feeling. It's all identity based. They want to soothe that feeling of shame, and the more shame, the bigger the identity group. You know, the bigger the bigger the damsel you have to save, and you're it's irresistible to feel like you're doing something positive in the context of a social justice warrior narrative. And that's exactly what these narratives are. And it's why we're seeing more and more of this kind of social chaos and the social warfare, is because we got these groups of young men who want to play the hero in order to solve the issue of shame. And they no longer give a shit about society. Why would they? They've been told that any action towards society harms women, either harms, minorities who are now taking the place of children, or it harms women, or in the case of the opposite narrative, it harms white women, and white children. Our society is corrupt and toxic and needs to be destroyed. And what are we seeing? We're seeing whole groups of men who are starting to engage in activity that approaches civil war. So this narrative is totally destructive. And the thing is, I look through this logically. I step through it step by step by step logically. I step through it logically. And as long as we have this narrative of class warfare between men and women, with men winning, our society is dead. It's going to die.
I agree. And, one of the most horrifying things about that and everything that you just said, which was actually really amazing and thought-provoking, is that if you actually look at it in the context of men's reactions and responses to things, in particular to the social justice narrative, and how how feminism has expanded its rubric to encompass all of these other lobby groups and pressure groups and all of that, it almost makes white nationalists look like they're the ones having the healthy response, because they're actually the ones who are seeing something wrong going on. And I don't even know if they know what it is. They just know that it's bad. Whatever it is, that shadow in the fog up there is something bad, and it's coming to eat us, right? And I think that, you know, when you have men embracing that shadow in the fog and saying, here, let me help it along, right? I think that's I mean, it's, I guess maybe in the short term, it helps them psychologically to cope with the idea that, you know, no matter what I do, unless I'm a supplicant to these feminists, I am harming women. You know, by absenting myself, I am harming women. By killing myself, I am harming women. By doing anything, by getting a job, I'm depriving a woman of a job that she deserves. By getting an education, I'm depriving a woman of an education she deserves more than me, right? No matter what I do or don't do, I'm harming a woman somewhere, right? But at least I can lick the feminist boot heel and use my privileged male voice to amplify the voices of women, right? That is so unbelievably unhealthy. And then you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and it's like, why can't we find some people in the middle who are just willing to say, yeah, that shadow in the fog, that's nothing good coming at us, so let's just steer clear of it, right? Like, let's just erase the narratives altogether rather than create a competing narrative. Like, it's so frustrating to me. But it seems like those are the only, and so much of the ethno-statists and white nationalist rhetoric is about, you know, preventing other men from coming in and, you know, and spoiling the wombs of white women. And I mean, it's just, oh, it's so frustrating.
And the thing is
what
that
this has led to basically is, because they are put in that position where all they can do is either completely rebel against it and rebel against every aspect of it and go completely the opposite direction, or lick the feminist boot heel and try to salvage some semblance of humanity by doing everything that feminists tell them to do at the point they're telling them to do it, and trying to eliminate masculinity. What we end up with is situations like we saw at Calgary Expo, where just saying that men are human, just saying that ideas should be discussed instead of locked into little echo chambers where the good ones get lost and the bad ones fester and become toxic beyond the ability to deal with them. Just saying those things, just talking about, you know, there are two sides to a discussion about whether or not women fit into the nerd community and how we fit in to the nerd community. Just saying those things offended people so badly that not only did they have to oust us, but they called the cops on us for being nearby. Just being nearby, and had all kinds of fantasies about what we were going to do. It's just, that has led to a situation where nobody questions the idea that there should be laws specifically designed for women, and that if a particular behavior, a particular action is to be considered a crime, it could be considered a crime only when you do it to women. And it's not so much a crime when you do it to men. That we would need specifically to penalize men and not women when they commit particular types of crimes. That education is only important when we're looking at girls. These are things that stem from that issue of men not having their own narrative, men not having their own humanity, men not having a right way to do things, because every time a right way is settled on, the next wave of feminists come along and say, oh no, that's bad, you can't do that either. And we've ended up we've ended up at a point now where we can't even talk about things like sexual violence without the idea that there are victims who are not female, and there are victims who are not adult, and there are victims who face female perpetrators. That those discussions not only can't be had in the same time and place as the discussions on female victims of male perpetrators without being considered interruptions, but they can't be had in their own spaces. They can't have their own discussions. Those discussions can't happen in a separate forum or a separate hashtag at a separate time without feminists coming along and saying, you're interrupting female victims. You're interrupting our discussion. You're taking up all the space. If you have any space, you're taking up all the space. And that's where we've ended up now. This is dystopia. We are in a dystopian society now. We are in a society now with senseless legislation, senseless policy, people malfunctioning like bots. We are living in a modern dystopia. And that modern dystopia was created by what Karen and Allison have described. This idea that we're in a gender war, that one gender is losing and the other gender is winning, and that makes it all right to dehumanize and try to eliminate the allegedly winning gender. And they're very effectively going about doing that. How is that winning for either side?
Okay, can I?
Yes.
All right. Well, then I wanted to just sort of add to that, and I also wanted to explain why it's really important we need to challenge this narrative. And the real reason why, and it's so funny because, to be quite frank, I lived in Saudi Arabia for 10 years. I don't really like Islam as a belief system. I recognize that some people use it just to get along, and it's used as a tool in poorer communities, etc. And somebody actually informed me that it was probably Wahhabism, Saudi Wahhabism. So I was put in the position, I guess, a year ago, or even a year and a half ago, of realizing that I have to face something in myself. I am not a fan of the Middle East, to say the least. I've lived there, and the country that I lived in was a slave state. And I mean, I even have I have comments from like 2006 describing the situation of women in Saudi Arabia and using the term oppression. I was there. I've been in that state of mind of regarding women in the Middle East as being oppressed, and that being an aspect of just how awful they are. But I had to work through that attitude step by step by step, logical step by step by step, to come to an understanding, a new understanding of how history works, of how societies work. And so to be put in the position of having to defend a group of people that I really don't like, and that's not fair, because nobody is defined entirely by their religion, their culture, Wahhabism, whatever. And to liquefy that dislike and try to hold myself to a position of integrity was an interesting experience. I guess it was almost karmic, but regardless, when I say that as somebody who's had to struggle through these thoughts already, had to struggle through particular attitudes towards groups of people and come out on what I believe to be an intellectually honest and position of integrity. And that is to say that it's really freaking easy to condemn Muslim men as being horrible misogynists that oppress their women. It's really easy to do that, and to do that based on a selective reading of what's going on in the Middle East. And it's very tempting when you see when you see terrorism, when you see a society that's very different in its morality, that's very anti-Semitic, that is very anti-gay, that's very anti-women's freedom, that's, you know, very anti-sexuality, and you are an American or a Canadian, and all of these things are values that you hold. It's really easy to buy into that. But the problem is this, and this is in particular sent out to people on the right. When you buy into this easy way of condemning another culture, you are condemning your own traditions as well. You are saying that women in conservative Christian communities are oppressed. You're saying women in the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, you know, 150 years ago are oppressed. And you're buying into a narrative in which you have to abdicate your own cultural traditions in order to be moral. Because what you're saying is that everywhere that feminism isn't is immoral. And that feminism is the only reason why our society is moral. And
but it's not moral, because feminism is here to judge us and nitpick every single fucking detail.
Well, regardless, when you concede that, as satisfying as it is to point at those men over there and say, oh yeah, they're the ones who are engaging in a class warfare between men and women, with them winning. They're the ones oppressing their women. There's the ones who are failing to protect and provide for women. And that's just somehow an aspect of masculinity that our culture just didn't do. Like we somehow controlled or something. It's very tempting to do that, but you have to realize that if you're in a conservative position, that finger is pointing right back at you. It's pointing right back at traditional Christian societies and communities. It's pointing right back at the social mores and attitudes we had, 50 years ago. And I'm not talking about, segregation. I'm talking about the idea of women being in the home, men working, there being guardianship. So men are responsible for making sure that their women are taken care of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're pointing right back at your own traditions, and you're basically handing the reins over to feminists and social justice warriors. You're basically saying, yes, you are more moral than we are. You are the corrective force of our society. You are the ones who are closer to God. And we are your supplicants. We are the ones who didn't get it. We're the ones who were turned a blind eye to the good and the righteous. And you're the ones who are correcting us. And this is why the right will never be able to correctly challenge the left, because they've just abdicated all moral authority to them. They've essentially said to the left, you are right. You're right. The only reason why our society is better is because you exist in it. And you corrected us. And I don't see how the right can ever mount a defense from that position. And they can't. That's the honest to God truth. They can't. They can only ever follow wherever the left leads. Because the right has already said, you're a better society because you are in it, left people on the left. We are in a better society because of you. We are in a society that doesn't hurt women, or a better society that's gotten better at not hurting women, at providing for women, because you guys are in it and you corrected us. And we are better people because of your correction. That's what the right is telling the left. It may not be telling it overtly, but through adoption of their beliefs and their arguing strategies, it's essentially giving them the moral authority to decide the route, the path that our society will take. So this actual fight between the left and the right is meaningless. It's absolutely meaningless, because the right will never be able to change the left's path.
Herman Cain actually had a really great way of describing the illusionary fight, modern fight between the left and the right. He said where here in the United States is what he was describing, but he could be describing the entire world, the state of affairs in the entire world. And what he basically said was, we're on the Titanic, and while it's sinking, the left and the right are arguing about the position the deck chairs ought to be in. And that's paraphrasing, but yes. That was when I heard that, I was, that was back when I was still working in retail, and I was on my way to or from lunch and I got sick of listening to local music, listening to talk radio, and heard that, and I'm like, that is exactly what it feels like. It feels like we are on a sinking ship, and they are arguing about a detail that has nothing to do with the situation, as if it is the most important thing. And it's very frustrating to watch. It's why I have gone from, in my lifetime, from not being aware of politics until maybe 10 or 11 years old. And we start early in my family, I guess. In any case, and then I went, hardcore conservative. And growing up, I got more and more conservative until about mid-20s and started going towards libertarian, because I kept watching them say, we're going to do this and it's going to accomplish this. And then they wouldn't. They would do something that they could make sound very close to what they said they were going to do, but it would accomplish something maybe polar opposite to what they said it was going to accomplish, like welfare reform. And this is something that, throughout my life, the evolution of my political outlook, I don't understand why other people don't get the same things that I get out of it. And it's how many people stay hardcore left or hardcore right when you look at the two parties, and when you look at the two sides of the argument, very, very often they're both saying the same thing. Very often. And they're both saying it in support of authoritarian power and a nanny state. And they each accuse the other of propagating a nanny state. And both sides do in different ways. And both sides claim to fight for your freedom in different ways, and then never do. And I don't know. It just, to me, it strikes me that we're in a situation where everybody in politics, the entire establishment, has bought the feminist narrative hook, line, and sinker, because they know that women with their in-group bias are more likely to vote as a women's bloc, and that men with their bias toward women as an in-group are more likely to vote for anything that is labeled a pro-woman issue, out of a sense of protection, or out of a sense of guilt, or out of a sense of this is the only thing I can do. And so if they market to women and they market to feminism, then they get what they want. They get their votes. They get their elections. And even when we voted in an outsider, even when we get Trump in office, even Trump does that. He's not as overt, and he doesn't do it enough to suit the feminist taste, so they demonize him. But even he does it. And his daughter does it. You can't sell things to the public without selling them to women first.
Well, what I think is hilarious is, if all you have to do to differentiate somebody who is on the right and somebody who is on the left is you just look at what men they are accusing of victimizing and harming and oppressing women. Is it those men back then and those men over there? Or is it these men now and these men here? That's the only difference.
Well, and the truth is, if you dig deep enough, there really wasn't a time where women were uniquely oppressed.
No,
and
never,
there's not
ever,
a
ever.
place where women are uniquely oppressed. And the feminist narrative on it being gender-based when oppression exists is it's all bullshit. What they basically do is they look at circumstances that are oppressive to people in general, and then they only care about what happens to women, what effect there is on women, and how women feel about it. Before we go on, I am going to catch up on this plethora of super chats. This goes like back 20 minutes to half an hour, maybe more. So, Viewing Stuff gave us £2 and said, yes, I would like to see you talk about this, in reference to Allison, I believe, talking about the conversation on skeptics. Then Joey Jojo gave us $5 and said, "Women have always had it easier than men in every situation. Yet I am the privileged male. Life sucks." And I got to agree to at least the first sentence of that. Obviously, calling people privileged is kind of stupid. Not that Joey Jojo is stupid for saying it, but that people are stupid for calling Joey Jojo privileged just because he's male. And that does make life suck. And it does seem to be the excuse, the common excuse today for coming up with things that are oppressive to men. And it is oppressive. Viewing Stuff gave us £2 and said, "It essentially boils down to security versus freedom." That's where I personally have the divide between authoritarianism and, I hate using the term libertarianism simply because we have a libertarian party here in the United States. And when I talk about being libertarian, I am not talking about the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian Party platform. I'm talking about more in terms of individual accountability and individual rights and freedoms, and as much as possible non-interference, and basically keeping government control of your life at a minimum. But it boils down to security versus freedom, and for the last century, particularly the last half of it, we have been giving up freedom for security at an alarming rate. Viewing Stuff gave us £2 and says, "How much weight does each have?" And I'm sorry, I don't remember what that was in reference to. Norse Viking 84, this was not a super chat, but it was very relevant to what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about how the feminist narrative strongly contributes to the problem of male suicide. He says, "It's even more evil. It's more along the lines of, we're not going to kill you per se. We're just going to make it nearly impossible for you to live." And that's kind of what we were talking about at that moment was feminism doesn't out and out kill men. What it does is take away everything that makes their life meaningful and attack everything that makes their life palatable and fun, and attack their right to exist in the same spaces as women and children, and demonize them, and eventually put them in a state of mind where their very existence is painful simply on the basis of being viewed as them not having a right to it. So yeah, I think that it's even more evil, and this is one of the few things I would term evil. We're not going to kill you per se, we're just going to make it nearly impossible for you to live. Joey Jojo gave us $5 and says, "Shame men constantly, deny men a purpose, destroy male spaces, destroy male interest, and demonize male sexuality. Feminists want men to commit suicide." I would say the truth is, feminists want men to change the laws in ways that provide more authoritarian power. And feminists are not smart enough, mainstream feminists, not rad femmes, because they do want men to commit suicide, but mainstream feminists aren't smart enough to figure out that because men are human, if you take away everything good in their lives, they will want to die. They think that they can persuade men to want to live to serve women without ever having the reward of being told they're doing it right, and not have mass suicide or frequent suicide. So that's that's where, although the movement itself has perpetuated the greatest scam in 2 centuries, there are ways in which feminists are incredibly stupid.
Well, I do want to attack the freedom over security, security over freedom, right? The choice between the two. Women choose security over freedom because in exchange for freedom, they will actually receive security. But men will always choose freedom over security because they're not going to receive security in exchange for their freedom. For women, it's freedom or security. For men, it's freedom or nothing.
And there is a divide in that way among women. There are women who are more like men in that than
Well, I have been as well, but
yeah,
in general, women will make that choice. I mean, like
yeah,
when I was at the Wisconsin Libertarian Party convention, and I was sitting and on a question and answer thing, and they were asking how can we get more female libertarians, right? How can we get more women into the Libertarian Party and the Libertarian movement? And I said, number one, you can't, and number two, whatever you do, don't.
yeah, because
Right?
that would put them in a position of becoming less and less libertarian. And
Yes,
you're right that I do see that with women in general, but it is something that um, there are women who recognize that there is a complete lack of security in too much security. And
oh,
it's,
of course, of course.
I would say the big difference between men and women is men don't need to recognize that in order to recognize that giving up your freedom for security is bad. You know, that
Well, you
it doesn't have to be dangerous. It simply has to take away that upon which you thrive. And men thrive on meeting and overcoming challenges. Many women don't. And
true.
that's the biggest difference that I've spotted between men and women in general. And part of it is because I thrive to a lesser degree than the men in my family, the boys in my family did, but still, I thrive on meeting and overcoming challenges. And it's to the point where if I get my gumption up to tackle a challenge, to face something that looks like it's going to be hard and that it's not going to be fun, but when I get done with it, I'm going to be proud of myself, or at least I'm going to have a sense of accomplishment, and I'm going to get something done that I think needs to get done, and then somebody else achieves it for me, and I don't go through that journey. I'm not relieved. I'm angry.
Yeah, no,
That was
I
my first.
absolutely agree.
That's something that a lot of women don't have. A lot of women, they might steel themselves to face something like that. I mean, oh God, I really got to do that. I got to go out and shovel this snow. I got to go out and uh, talk to city council about the situation in my neighborhood, and they've passed this regulation, and it's actually causing problems. Can't they repeal it? Things like that. And somebody comes along, oh, you don't have to do that. I'll do it for you. They're like, oh, thank God, I don't have to deal with that. No, that's like, but I got all this stuff ready. I have all these things to say. Can't I just go in and talk to him anyway? I just like I've got all my snowsuit on. I've got the shovel right here. I can do this. And I think if we fostered the girls that had that attitude rather than quashing it with all of the constant babying and constant, you know, treating everything that happens to them that's dismal or um, unpalatable or in any way intimidating as a personal attack or an attack on their gender. If we stopped doing that and started fostering, you know, get your shoulders up, get ready to deal with this, and then when we're done, you'll be ready for a high five. You'll be ready to celebrate. You'll be ready to brag about what you did, and started fostering that more and more. The problem that feminists have made up about women in STEM, it would disappear. Most of the problems that feminists have made up about women in positions of prestige or responsibility or any other area that women are being kept out of this, go away. Those problems will go away. That's what's
Well,
keeping those girls out.
It's not even just a matter of telling these girls to put on their big girl panties and
Yeah.
and do it. But I mean, just want to bring up something that Karen brought up earlier about how men they won't give up freedom because they don't have security. Well, never do I see that more often than when I'm like doing what I do with the crisis lines, right? Because oftentimes women will call in, and of course, like there are many times where women will be so upset and they'll be desperate for help. And the nice thing is that I'll be able to give that to them, and then they'll be able to, pick themselves up with that help that they've got and move on with their day. But more often than not, when I get men calling in looking for resources, like, they can be so despondent in comparison just because they know that there's very little help for them. Like, I'll try and offer some resources, like, no, I've tried that, I've tried all of these things, and nobody is willing to help me because, like, I'm a single guy without children, right? And pretty much all the resources are all for women and or people with families, and these guys, they just get left behind, absolutely zero security. And still, when you try and bring up, hey, it really sucks that there's not a lot of resources for guys, half the time you wind up getting called a misogynist even for bringing it up, or for groups that are trying to bring it up.
Well, I mean, what I always like to do with people who sort of are on the fence, right, is ask them, okay, I tell them about women's entitlements, benefits, and protections under coverture. I tell them about, like, back when there really was, what anybody would call a patriarchy. And I tell them about how, any woman could go into any store and purchase goods on her husband's credit, and he would be responsible for that. And that is the exchange that she made. That is the bargain she made when she handed him her property and her income, was the ability to act as his legal agent, purchase goods in his name on his credit, and have him be solely responsible for them, and have her be immune from any debts that she racked up in that way. Okay. And that she was the only one who had any entitlement legally to protection from domestic violence, from spousal violence. She was the only one who could appeal to an ecclesiastical court or an equity court for an order of protection against her husband. And if he violated that after it was granted, then he would be in violation of a court order and in contempt of court. And then it became a criminal matter. So essentially, she was the only one who was protected from her spouse. Her spouse was not protected from her. He couldn't go to a judge and say, my wife is misbehaving. My wife is committing crimes for which I will be held responsible. Do something, judge, to control my wife. The judge would tell him, she's your problem, right? You deal with it. So essentially, when you have all of these protections and benefits and entitlements that women operated under every single day, right? And most of their handicaps only ever came up during big decision time, when it's time to sell a piece of land or a piece of property or a herd of cattle or whatever, right? And most women enjoyed the benefits and entitlements on a daily basis, and only ever became even aware of their handicaps during very, very sporadic times, and only when their husband did something that they didn't approve of, right? Or they didn't want him to do, right? But we essentially have this situation where women had all of these protections. Women had protection from rape. Women had protection from domestic violence. Women had protection from financial exploitation. Women had all of this protection, right? Imagine, okay, look at what feminists are doing right now, and imagine what would happen if we actually had a government that was made up of 50% or more women with a feminist mindset. Would men be entitled to any protections or benefits under that system? Would they, they would have inferior status, right? Would they have superior protection? Would there be anything written into law to protect them from exploitation by women who might abuse their authority or their superior position, right? I don't think so. And I don't think anybody thinks so.
Now, I think if there was ever any evidence of which way that would go, probably the way feminists and women posting to #MeToo didn't react to #ThemToo, and the news that there was a documentary out about child exploitation in Hollywood, and that they could promote something that would potentially lead to reform in Hollywood, that could prevent a large amount of exploitation and abuse of the most vulnerable of the human population, children. And there was just this resounding, echoing silence around it. Very few of them spoke up. There were a few. None of the big movers and shakers of the everybody talk about women being exploited in Hollywood movement did. None of them came out and worked to get that into the forefront. None of them wanted to see it trend. None of them made any effort at all in terms of making that a big public discussion. Because the majority of the news coming out about Hollywood bigwigs exploiting children is of boys being exploited. They didn't care. If it had been a big news story about little girls being molested, you can bet they'd have been on top of that. This starts in childhood. They do it to us all of our lives, blah, blah, blah. No,
yeah.
Not a word out of most of the people posting in #MeToo about the boys. And then the information that on how this messes up a child has been out for a long time. It's been out for years. Even if they didn't care about the kids themselves, even if they didn't care that it's a hurtful, painful, scary, all of the things that happen to you when you're molested, all of those things don't matter to them because it's a boy. All right, fine. There is the fact that there is a disturbing rate of exploitation during childhood in the history of adult males who engage in sexual misconduct and several other types of misconduct. It's like if you subject someone to that degree of violence as a child and you teach them that violence is how you get what you want and that human interaction is violence-based, they might grow up to be violent. And yet, nobody really wanted to talk about it because it was happening to boys. They're so short-sighted. No, they wouldn't protect men. They wouldn't give a rat's ass about men. They don't give a rat's ass about men now when men are the ones who do everything for them. Feminism has never accomplished a single thing without male assistance. They've never gotten a law passed without male legislators. They've never gotten social change created without help from men. They've never gotten change made in policy related to the workplace, related to schools, related to any organization. They've never accomplished anything that they didn't have to ask men to do for them. That is all feminism is. It's a lobbying movement that asks men to give feminist politicians things, feminist lobbyists things, in women's name. And they don't care about men. They don't care about the people who do everything for them. They are stupid and short-sighted. They don't care if they destroy the goose that lays the golden egg for them every day. So, yeah, no, they wouldn't care about men. I'm going to read 2 more super chats. And then I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the next news story. Because I think we're talking this to death. But Viewing Stuff gave us £2, or gave us £5 and said my second £2 was in reference to the first £2. First £2 was in reference to when people claim women are oppressed, oppressed women get security, and which we did cover. And then he gave us 2 more pounds and said which people who make the oppressed claim to ignore. And then Click Accept, this is not a super chat, but asked me specifically what I think about egalitarianism, and I've got an answer to that. I don't believe in it. Now, I believe in egalitarian law and policy. I do not believe that men and women are the same. And for egalitarian equality to exist, men and women would have to be the same. We have to be able to admit that there are strengths that are more common to men and weaknesses that are more common to men, and strengths that are more common to women and weaknesses that are more common to women, if we want to live in a reality and if we want to succeed in that reality. And unfortunately, reality is really the only option we have. So, no, I don't believe in egalitarianism. I do believe in dealing with people on their merits, and that we should not allow what is average to decide for us how we deal with the individual. We shouldn't allow what is common to decide for us how we deal with the individual. And we shouldn't have to have ignorance of what is common and what is the norm, what is average, to prevent us from dealing with the individual on his or her own merits rather than on those concepts. So that's it for me on egalitarianism. Not that I'm opposed to people treating people with the same degree of respect and the same degree of humanity and all that. I just think that we shouldn't ignore the fact that there are differences, and it's okay for there to be differences, and we don't have to develop a cookie cutter for everybody in order for people. Fair treatment isn't everybody having the same outcome. Okay, fair treatment is not abusing somebody because they're different. And there's a big difference between that and automatically having the same outcome. But on to the next story. This one is a little more, it's sort of light-hearted and sort of not. And I think I'm going to go back to that picture. By the way, this is my gag. If anybody doesn't recognize the scene, is from that episode of the Twilight Zone, the original Twilight Zone, with the airplane and the gremlin. That's the gremlin, but that's not the face of the original actor. That's actually David Futrell's face. I just had to do that. The last time we had a convention, that was my heading to the convention, look out, and this is what I see on the wing. But in any case, I figured that would be a good costume for Futrell, a gremlin. But on Halloween, every year feminists have to come up with some complaint or another. For the past few years, it's been there are only sexy costumes available for women. You can't have any costume that's not sexy. And what if I don't want to look sexy? And of course, MRAs and other non-feminists have proved over and over and over again that there are plenty of costumes out there that are not sexy, like this one. And so now it's cultural appropriation. Another Halloween, more things not to dress up as, by Andrew G. Another Halloween, another year of us being told what we or children cannot wear. And as has become commonplace in recent years, cultural appropriation has been cited as a reason as to why people can't interact with anything or mimic something from a culture that is not inherently their own. This time around, Sachi Ferris, I hope I've pronounced this person's name right, of a blog called Raising Race-Conscious Children, says that we can't let children dress up as something of a different cultural background. That means no Moana for any white girls. However, just because you have a white daughter doesn't mean that she has free reign to dress up as whatever she wants. She wants to dress up as Elsa from Frozen? Sorry. No can do. Sachi says in her blog, I feel like because Elsa is a white princess, and we see so many white princesses, her character sends the message that you have to be a certain way to be beautiful. Fairy's blog is only one place where people scream cultural appropriation from the top of their lungs. Just go poking around websites like BuzzFeed or Vice's if you dare, and there will be plenty of articles or videos telling us why you appropriating someone else's culture is bad. The good news is that amid all of this nonsense about cultural appropriation, there are those out there who continue to push back. Kyle Smith of the National Review wrote an article criticizing Ferry's blog, summing up the insanity pretty well by saying, "The left used to insist on seeing people as individuals, not members of groups. The goal used to be that kids of different races would play together, oblivious to one another's superficial differences. This was commendable, and many a race barrier has fallen. Now the left is determined to put those barriers back up, to teach kids to obsess over race. It is adamant that pigmentation has to be of overriding concern to you, and that if it isn't to your children must be indoctrinated to divide people based on skin color, to calculate varying levels of sensitivity and privilege based on melanin. It's not only ludicrous, it's alarming. Don't let this diseased mindset take hold. Go ahead and dress your kid as Moana this Halloween." And I just want to point out, there are actually universities with policies on what you can and can't wear on campus to themed parties and Halloween and any other event that might be a costumed event based on this idea of cultural appropriation. But I think the silliest has to be Halloween, and I think Count Dankula had the best point on this on Twitter when he pointed out that many people of minority status are dressing up for Halloween in celebration of a holiday that is Celtic in origin. And they're engaging in appropriation of culture as well. So clearly this whole cultural appropriation thing doesn't go both ways, does it? And it's absolutely ridiculous to see people freaking out over Halloween costumes. And apparently I stole Max's point. But in any case, Prim has her name in the chat. So Prim? Oh shit, guys, hang on a second. I'm gonna come out and come back in. I can't hear you, so you're gonna have to repeat yourself. And you can start repeating yourself now.
Yeah, okay, so in The Wizard of Oz, what was the name of the witch that got by the head?
I think that was the Wicked Witch of the East, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Okay, so this Sachi bitch, she really needs to dress up as the Wicked Witch of that whole day on how the house can fall out of the sky and land on top of her. Yeah, if you want to really pursue this whole cultural appropriation thing, you got to take it all the way back to where it started from in Celtic heritage. Okay, now if we're really going to try and listen to the people that create cultural practices, let's go to the Celtics and see what they think. Oh, they think that anybody can dress up as whatever the hell they want? Then please shut the fuck up and let people just enjoy this one period of the year where they can dress up as whatever the hell they want and just partake in a celebration where cultural norms are completely gone for a day. Give me a fucking break. You really want to try and make little girls feel guilty just because they find something inspiring in a fucking Disney character that has a different skin color from them? Why?
I love your inability to finish a sentence there. That is exactly how I feel about it. Okay, there's a couple of points that I want to make here. The fact that they're like, oh, little white girls, you can't dress as Moana, but, oh, also, you can't dress as Elsa because then that might be racist. It's like, okay, I guess that there's just nothing that they can dress up as because you can't dress up as a witch, otherwise that's appropriating pagan culture. You can't dress up as a ghost, or that might be appropriating, like, I don't know, maybe it'll look like KKK members or something like that. You pretty much can't do anything without pissing somebody off.
Yeah, and you can't appropriate the zombie culture. Oh, sorry, the living in culture.
You can't appropriate nudist culture either, because that would be inappropriation, and you might get arrested.
If you're a white person on Halloween, here's what you do: you get a green garbage bag. Okay, you cut holes for your head and your arms. You get some padding. Okay, and then you get a tiny little dollhouse chair. Okay, and you stick it on top of your head, and you go as Gum under the chair. Right? or gum under the table, because that is all that you are. You are that disgusting wad of gum that somebody stuck under the table or the chair. Okay. And it's not appropriating anything. It's not appropriating the lived experiences of gum or chairs or tables. And so I think that is possibly the only politically correct costume there is.
Actually,
can I just assume the mental state of gum? How dare you?
You did. Yes, you did.
Can I?
That's just.
But
real quick, I'm going to read Joey
gender.
Jojo's super chat here. He says, Joey Jojo gave us $5 and says, Halloween is cultural appropriation. It's called Samhain, and you celebrate it by sacrificing kids and animals. The last great one was 3,000 years ago.
Yes. Can I suggest?
Can I suggest my child?
No. No.
Can I?
Would that be okay?
Can I suggest another costume idea to go?
All right.
You know, when I was a kid, I found out that there was a skeleton inside my body, and it freaked me out. Right. So then every year following that, I went door to door on Halloween naked. Don't think of the skin. Don't think of the skin. Just a thought.
Well, I would like to.
But you're a male though, so like that would be like oppressing women though, just by having it all out there, right?
No,
I don't know. The women in my neighborhood seem to.
It's ripping off nudist culture. That is cultural inappropriation, and if you're an adult, you definitely could get arrested.
Cultural inappropriation.
But
soon we're just gonna have a bunch of like. Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, it's going to be white people are not allowed to participate in Halloween because they might offend somebody by doing something. And then eventually we're just going to have like non-denominational holiday number 1, non-denominational holiday number 2, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Here's the best costume you can see in the window up there. By the way, that is my husband. He made a Yip Yip costume. And the reason it looks like the reason it looks like it's looking is because we were at a movie night Halloween party, and you can see in the computers or the television screen there that it's being hooked up to a computer. So but that's a costume that not only can it not be really called cultural appropriation, because Sesame Street was kind of all about not having divisions between the cultures, but you can't tell who's under there. So it's the only picture of my husband that you'll see on here, because that way he keeps his anonymity. Everybody knows he doesn't really look like a Yip Yip.
Yip, 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 yip.
Yip, 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 yip.
And everybody knows the Yip Yips.
Okay, can I get in here for some business?
Business? Yes. We don't need no stinking business. Oh, before we do.
We don't need to hear any of your stinking business.
Here's Jesus, a Halloween costume of Jesus. This was at the Yellow Springs Zombie Walk in 20, I believe, 11. I have several years of pictures from that. But okay, now Allison, you can have your business.
Okay.
And that's not cultural
first of all, I just want to remind everyone that we're doing this stream. I don't know if you did remind them that the reason why we are all on the Tuesday stream is because Brian is currently undergoing an unexpected additional round of chemo. And oh, okay. Well, that's why we're doing this. Apologies that you didn't know that. But that's I'm just going to be telling you guys now, and he will have to undergo surgery in December. So it's not as bad a news as it could be, but it is not as good as it could be either. We were hoping that he wouldn't have to have the additional round of chemo and the surgery. So that's why we're going to be having a light week this week. And please, have Brian in your thoughts, because this has been very difficult for him. He has hidden it very well, and he's dealt with it very well. And he's tried to not make it apparent how difficult it has been for him. So, and I basically made the decision last week when he told me that he was going to have to go through another round of chemo, because of our conversations that we've had. We talk pretty much almost daily during the week. And so I had a bit more insight into how difficult this has been for him. So I sort of made the decision, like, yeah, this is not, you're not going to be able to. I didn't want to make like the final decision for him, but I figured that if he's been suffering that much from the previous chemo, then it was getting worse each week. Then he's probably not going to be able to make it this week. So please put him in your thoughts, and wish him speedy recovery. And he's going to definitely need it in December, because this particular surgery is going to be really rough. Yeah, so that's why we're having a light week this week, just out of deference to Brian's situation, and also, of course, the legal stuff that we're doing. I've been working on putting up a legal fundraiser, and I would really appreciate it if you're listening now and you want to see this justice done, that you go and put something in the hat. It's at www.feedthebadger.com. This is the final stretch. This is it. And if the opposing counsel does manage to pull yet another delaying tactic out of his hat, I will be doing my damnedest to make sure that we get as many witnesses on the stand in the next trial, in the 3 days of the trial. Like I said, we can't really predict what he's going to do. He has been very unpredictable. I'll put it that way. Like he has baffled our legal counsel.
Baffled everybody.
Like he's a baffling human being. And what I've learned from lawsuits is that no matter what one of the counsel says, the judge has to take the time to actually decide upon it. So a counsel can get up with a counsel could be a rabid meerkat, get up and just spew a bunch of clicks. And the judge would have to rule on it. We have to take time to consider the counsel's position and rule on it, no matter how insane. So, like I said,
like parenting toddlers.
Fucking waste of time.
Yeah, it's so like I said, I'm going to by hell or by high water, I'm going to get as many people on the witness stand as possible in the 3 days we have in November. I cannot even promise that it's going to be concluded in November, because again, this person, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the individual that we're up against is extremely good at finding excuses to delay matters. And and you know what? I guess that's the legal system, right? We want to make sure that people have every opportunity to bring up whatever they can to defend themselves against a charge.
Well, it's not just that. They get paid by the hour most of the time, so he's just racking up the dollar signs for himself.
And so things are slightly different in civil cases than they are in criminal cases too. In criminal cases, you have a prescribed set of, you have a right to these things. The state is allowed to do these things. The state is not allowed to do these things. And so most of the maneuverings that you find in criminal court are the state did something it's not allowed to do. The accused has not been afforded the right to do one of the things that the accused should be afforded the right to do. New evidence has come up that wasn't known before, something like that, or an appeal. You don't usually see motion after motion after motion, and it's usually things like this evidence was collected wrongfully or in a manner that the state is not allowed to collect it by, so we want to suppress this. And now we've gotten to the point where you have the state trying to suppress exculpatory evidence based on whether or not it embarrasses the accuser. That's been introduced by feminists, thank you very much, in sexual violence cases. And if they're not careful, it'll end up getting expanded to the degree that it gets used against you if you get accused of not paying your taxes or something like that. But in civil court, it's much fewer holds barred. There are still some things that you can or can't do. There are still some rules that you have to follow, but you get much more ridiculous motions. And it allows, that's why the term vexatious litigant exists. You get people who will who will make motion after motion after motion just to keep the other side busy, even though they know what they've introduced is going to get ruled against, or even though they've done it improperly, or even though they know that all it's going to do is delay the inevitable final ruling. It's not going to change what gets presented in the final case and so on. And not that I'm necessarily calling the other side a vexatious litigant, but because we haven't dealt with enough to throw that label around. I've seen somebody deal with a vexatious litigant, and that went on for 7 years. But this is starting to look like the same kind of behavior. I'm waiting for a point at which we get told that the other side is introducing the argument that we are something, that we are guilty of an accusation because a lot of people have made the accusation, or because they have made the same accusation repeatedly. Because that's exactly the same kind of thing. They're fitting the pattern that I saw in the beginning of the vexatious litigant case. And that is much easier to do in civil court, and that's what we are dealing with. So when Allison says we can't be sure that we're going to get through this time around, that it's going to be the final step this time around, it's very possibly correct. You know, it's an unfortunately serious possibility.
What I find the weirdest about it is just that
I got to address a comment. Jay Damley says, Hannah, please drink something. Just for the record, this happens to me because I have dry mouth. It's part of the thing that causes me chronic pain. It's going to happen. You guys are going to have to deal with it. And I drink stuff in between. I have like 4 glasses of water here. So I drink in between every comment. You guys are just going to have to deal with it. Sorry.
I do want to say, you know, one of the things that I find the most bizarre about this particular case is that it seems like the defendant's counsel is kind of shooting himself and his clients in the foot often, right? Like it's almost like he hasn't been paying attention, right? Or he's got everything so confused that, you know, so I mean, like, it's not even like he's trying to be vexatious. He's actually like doing things that just seem so off the wall and so out there that it's hard to really even get a grasp on what on earth is he thinking. So, I mean, that's one of the most bizarre things about this case in particular.
Okay, I want to point out we had planned on starting in with the raffles before we get too deep into the legal stuff. So I know, Allison, you probably had something prepared to read, but do you want to do the raffle before we
Actually, all I want to do is appeal to anybody listening who wants to see justice done. This has been one of the most depressing, frustrating things I have ever undertaken. And I would really appreciate it if you made it possible so that we can finish it. So just go to www.feedthebadger.com and just whatever you can give is very much appreciated. I did this. I know we have a lot of detractors who say that we're making money off of this. You do not make money off of lawsuits. This was done specifically so that other small creators and small business people have a recourse, or at least a precedent set, so that they can follow the same path. And if you're left, look at it this way: a corporation has decided that it is going to gatekeep an artistic community and make it so that people who do not agree with its particular moral landscape are unable to ply their trade. If you're left, look at it that way. This is saying, okay, that's okay for a corporation to be able to do. They can gatekeep an artistic community and prevent people from being part of it if they don't have the right politics. And if you're on the right, it is the politics of the day, the politics of du jour is the social justice and feminist victim narratives that are basically destroying our society. So either way, consider fighting back or helping me fight back. Again, this is just please do it. That's all I can really say. This is okay.
This is the situation. Did you want to go ahead with the raffle?
Yeah, sure. So this is a raffle for the people on Discord. If you're a patron on Discord, you might be chosen to receive a thing of great thinginess. So let's do it. Andrew, cue the raffle bot. All right, there's no sound. We should probably have some sort of sound. Oh wait. Oh, Andrew has completed the raffle bot. So congratulations, Agent TX or Agent X. Congratulations, Paltus. And congratulations, Gus the Dork. If you are any of those particular patrons on the Discord, then you have won a thing of great thingy renown. And please send your information where you want this sent to topic@badgerpod.com, and I will get right on that.
Sorry, I didn't have a sound effect. I would have if I had realized we needed one. But because I can find those, I'll bet there's some online that are
maybe
public
for next
domain.
month.
Yep, maybe for next month. But regarding the lawsuit, this is something that people talk about making money on lawsuits because of a few rare cases in the United States. And these are always the ones that make news, right? Somebody gets a paper cut and they sue for $300,000 and win. And you hear about, the paper cut, and you don't hear necessarily that, oh, the paper cut got infected or was cut by, the cut came from a piece of paper that had poison on it, or the paper cut was on the individual's eye. I actually know somebody that got a paper cut on her eye because a shelf broke above her head and the paper fell on her. And it wasn't on her eyelid, it was on her eyeball. And yes, I know every single person out there listening to this is cringing and wincing and going, oh my God! Well,
yeah, that's pretty gross, Hannah.
You get mad and sue for $300,000 over something like that. I think everybody could understand, okay? I don't understand if somebody wins that much. It healed, no effect on her vision or anything like that. Now, if she lost an eye, yeah, I could see getting a big amount of money for that. But there are a lot of people who look at something like that and think of the money coming in as gain, and they don't think about, did this person lose their ability to do the job that they were doing because they lost some function, and that's what they sued over? How much money do you make in your lifetime at a job? Did this person suffer something that is going to cause a lot of medical bills?
Well, and this is Canada too, right? Yeah. So it's very, very like, I don't know exactly what the laws are, but as far as I know, there are no lawyers out there who work on contingency, right? So there are no lawyers who are like, we're willing to take the chance, right? And we're going to take 30% of whatever you get, right? And if you lose, you're not out of pocket. That doesn't happen in Canada. So you might pour $100,000 into pursuing a legal case and only get an award, a judgment of $50,000 compensation. So you're literally out money, right? Which is why there is much less litigation in Canada than there is in the United States.
Now, that said, the lawyers that take contingency in the U.S., that's not as common as people think. I've been in car accidents. I've been injured before, and I've had to sue for medical bills more than once for certain. And I ended up, like, my lawsuit never got finished. And a lawyer just dropped my lawsuit because he didn't think he was going to win it. So it doesn't just involve the expenses of the lawyer. What the lawyer does is, well, you got to make sure your evidence, you got all your ducks in a row, right? So you're out of your job because you've been in an accident, or you're dealing with this situation, but you have to go to the doctor and get testing and get evidence that is continuing to show, not just at the outset, but that this isn't getting better, or that this is happening or that is happening. So the amount that you spend just on your lawyer fees is not the only thing that you spend on a case like that. Now, in a case like this one, we've had other things to deal with. We've had to deal with the fact that not only are we going through all these legal maneuvers because the other side is just throwing up motions and making demands and so on of the court, we have also had travel to deal with, and we have also had time ourselves put in, because we're not dealing with a lawyer representing us that does all of the work for us, and then we just walk into court, you know, with our happy little selves to deal with the case. A lot of the footwork has been done by us and people who have supported us, and a lot of the case building, Allison did most of that. You know, so we have legal guidance, and there is a lot of expense associated with that, but the amount of time that is being put into this is huge. And I mean, unless you want to call working for a few cents an hour a profit, I really don't think you can consider the amount that's going to be achieved by this case to be a profit.
I didn't take this case on. In fact, I fully expect that we will go into the final round, and we won't get the full amount that was requested.
And even if we did, by the time we get done, it will have cost more to fight the case than we will get.
Than to get the award, yes, definitely. But even if we go into the final round, what I'm after is the ruling that they can't do this. That this was an unacceptable thing to do to someone. And maybe what will happen in the future is they'll think twice about doing it to another human being. And that's why I'm doing this.
The thing that really pisses me off, I mean, sorry, I just have to get in here real quick, but the thing that really pisses me off is the people who are like, where is all of this money going towards? Allison has been through a shitload of shit dealing with this, and it's never been about the money. And she's put in so much time trying to work for a greater cause for this. And if anybody says, where's all the money going? I swear I'm going to start slashing some bitches. Appreciate what people are going through here, because it's a lot.
I don't think that'll be taken well.
Obviously,
well, we can joke about this, and our frustration level is about as high as you can get with this, and I think nobody's more frustrated about it than Allison, and I think the rest of us are pretty frustrated, so that's pretty high. But because we are dealing with people who don't understand humor, like they have their label for humor. And this is something that, an article that just came out on the Honey Badger Brigade blog drew my attention to this, or rather the way it should be explained. Somebody actually asked for an encyclopedia article to be debunked. Anybody that knows encyclopedia, it's a parody, right? It's a joke. It's supposed to be making fun of Wikipedia. But it's only funny if you're making fun of something that is real. And the article that was requested to be debunked was actually making fun of a straw man of something that was real. And so for anybody that's actually familiar with the real thing, it flopped. You saw the same thing with the Saturday Night Live sketch on MRAs. You see the same thing with actually just about any feminist parody on the men's rights movement, or on Gamergate, or on anti-feminists or non-feminists, where they'll straw man us, and they'll parody the straw man, And they think it's hilarious, but since it doesn't actually have a basis in reality, they kind of flop. There's nothing to, like, there's not even anything to get mad about. It's just stupid. And that lack of ability to distinguish humor, combined with the fact that anything we say as a joke gets taken seriously, kind of makes it dangerous for us to even joke about commonly understood humor, commonly used phrases. Smack a bitch. Oh, you're talking about beating women! No. But, of course, a feminist would believe you. Like, at the one time when you shouldn't listen and believe because it's a gag. It drives me nuts. That's actually part of the basis, the underlying basis for the actions that led to this case, was treating satire, and of all things, satire that included us calling ourselves an impossible thing, as if it was a serious statement that must be taken seriously and responded to as a statement of fact or intended statement of fact. Like, how?
Okay, I'm going to thank some people. I want to thank, actually, the Prim Reaper. Thank you. And Wim and Charlotte and Louise Siva? Louise and Calvin, who've already contributed to it, to our fundraiser. Thank you so much. And please, if you have $5, just throw it in the hat so that we can finish this off. It's about making contract law actually not just be for defending big government and corporate interests, which is really what it does now. And really, doing this lawsuit has given me a really strong feeling of how legal redress is not accessible to the average person. It's just not. Like, it doesn't work anymore. The system it's not available. I mean, the amount of stuff that I've had to go through in civil court with this, and we all had to deal with in civil court with this, it's mind-boggling. How can this be allowed to be a thing? Because it makes the legal process, it makes legal redress almost outside of the possibility of the average person.
What we're dealing with here, essentially, the history of this goes back to that problem of organizations creating policy with the idea that if they make it vague, that gives them leeway to sort of ignore the other side's interest in a contract. And you see that on every social site you're on. You see that in YouTube. You see that in just about any agreement that you make for anything like this. So hopefully, if we are able to get through this and actually get a ruling that holds the other side accountable for their contract, their side of the contract, and for following their contract, and and doesn't allow vague wording and chicanery to be used to say, basically, well, we have a contract, but you don't, which is what essentially happened here. Perhaps it will provide some protection to everyone in those circumstances.
Yeah. I was actually at a meeting recently for a bunch of fathers who were going through the legal process to try and get access to their kids. And a lot of them were talking about the same kinds of issues. Lawyers wasting a shitload of time just keeping the case alive just so that they could get more money. All the while, these fathers are suffering trying to get access to their kids. Like, one of them was talking about how he was crying at night. He was trying to think of sneaky ways that he could try it and just get a glimpse of them. Like, it's horrible. And like what Allison just said is exactly right. It almost takes the law out of the hands of people who aren't like filthy rich. It's just not feasible for a lot of these people to afford all of this.
Well, and that's the situation in when I was dealing with the witness end of the vexatious litigant case. One of the motions that the ex threw out, and this case was essentially started by a woman who lost custody of her children because she kept her child in a home with a man who beat the child. And evidence was shared with Child Protective Services to get protective custody for the child's father. And as soon as he had protective custody, the mother started making false accusations. And she went apeshit, honestly. Her accusations were everything from early on, she accused him of just violence and crank calls and stalking, harassment and everything. She eventually accused him at one point of rape, and was allowed to change her story multiple times by the cops, who never treated it as less credible, because she said, oh no, it was a different day and a different place and a different time and everything but a different person. Everything about her story changed, but who she was accusing. The dumbest one, the dumbest accusation of all had to be the accusation, the false accusation of a drive-by greeting that never happened, where she accused him of driving past a bar she frequented during a time period when she had told a judge that she would be out of the state, and waving menacingly. And every single time she would file something like this, or make a motion, or go to the cops with a charge, or any of those things. We had to go through this whole ordeal of who was he with, what was he doing, what evidence do we have to prove the truth, because we have to deal with another lie. And once she figured out that we were monitoring him so that she couldn't lie about him, she started demanding information about us. My vehicle VIN number was demanded in a court document illegally, with no recourse. I couldn't file a complaint about that because it was a domestic. It was just insane. And so I mean, stuff like this can get very insane in family court cases, and this was all over custody. All of it was over custody. And that's the idea that filing a lot of motions and dealing with a lot of stuff like this is rare. And it is expensive. I mean, he spent thousands of dollars defending himself against these allegations, and that was in a situation where it was blatantly obvious that the person he was dealing with was a nut. Everybody knew it. Nobody cared. Even the local domestic violence victims advocacy group that was representing her knew it and didn't care.
Well, hell, one of the examples in the meeting that I was talking about, like the mother was making threats of suicide and stuff like that on Facebook, and yet somehow she was still getting all of the edge in getting custody over the kids because, women are better caregivers, right? Even though she's regularly talking about committing suicide and hurting the children. And
this is a serious thing, because you look at in the past, news stories about women committing suicide, mothers committing suicide, they take their kids with them. You don't give custody to a parent in a custody battle that is threatening during the battle to commit suicide. You just don't. And this is, like, there have been stories of men taking their children and ex-wives with them as well. This is a time period where you say, all right, obviously we are in a different situation than we thought. We now have somebody who needs treatment, and you do everything you can do to support the person. and you do everything you can do to help them get out of that mindset. But you don't put them in charge of the most vulnerable people in the world, a set of children. I wouldn't do that,
Yeah,
regardless of the gender
up.
of the parent. That's no. That's an instant no. And I do recognize
like
that
we were
losing contact with your family can drive somebody to suicide. But when somebody's making public threats like that, you can't trust them.
Well, like we were talking about the other day on HBR Talk, we should be caring most about the children, right? Like, why are we even entertaining the notion that somebody who's making like suicidal threats, and obviously public ones, should be having control of no, it wasn't 2, it was 4 young children. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and you probably find that you'll still get motion after motion of this person's listened to, whereas the other side might not have the same benefits. Now, in our case, again, we don't have to deal with anything quite like that. I don't think anybody on the other side has made any type of threats on that level. All we've been dealing with is a widespread media campaign against us. And of course, you have the mainstream media campaign, and you have, nut jobs like Futrell, who likes to just take whatever he can find and twist it and strawman it, and then report based on the strawman and the twisting, rather than the actual facts. But we are having to deal with a significant amount of strange maneuvering. I mean, right down to the point, I don't know, Allison, what items are we actually able to talk about? Are you there? Allison might be missing for a moment. I noticed she says in the chat, let's do another drawing, but...
Hello?
Ah, there you are. Okay. I'm like...
Okay, we can... Harry just told me we can tell the truth.
We can talk about everything?
Well, maybe not everything, but
yeah.
Like there's certain stuff that I will not be able to talk about. I don't even know if I'll be able to talk about it at the end of the trial, I hope, because it's some crazy ass stuff.
Well, hell, like the stuff that you showed me in the police report today, I was wondering
if
we could point out
yeah, we should probably wait till we make absolutely sure we can talk about that, because that is some crazy stuff too. It is some crazy
I will just say very, very plainly and simply, there are certain aspects of reality that a police officer should never have to explain to a complainant, and some of those had to be explained to our complainant, and that's as far as I'll go with it, because that's not giving any full details.
Yeah, you want to okay. Side.
French Honey Badgers gave us $2,000 towards the trial, and he wants a shout out, so I'll give him a shout out. Thank you, French Honey Badger.
That deserves a huge shout
very
out.
Generous.
And a huge thank you. Very
Holy
much.
Shit! I'm gonna be an anarcho-capitalist for the rest of the stream.
We'll just start saying anarcho-capitalist things.
Well, yeah, he's already working on converting me directly because he knows I'm close. So you gotta understand, after everything I've seen in my life, I'm so fed up with the nanny state. The majority of problems in my life that were not caused by my own stupidity were caused by the nanny state. I've never. And I also want to thank solid
Henry
help from the nanny state,
who threw $5 in the chat or in the hat, and thank you, Henry. That's very appreciated. Every bit helps. So don't look at the fundraiser and say I can only put in $5, because every $5 is that last $5 that we needed to get over the top. And thanks again to French Honey Badger. Once again, I'll have to rack my brains of something to give you.
Well, The Great Indoors 1979 says French Honey Badger is capitalist god.
Yeah. If I wasn't, you know what, French Honey Badger, I think I'll pursue becoming a authoritarian communist, just so I can become an ANCAP again and say it was because of you. How's that?
And we just got a super chat from Hoki Bukisa, who gives us $4.20. Ha ha ha. And he just said heart. Not the word, just a little heart emoji. So
okay, let's do another round of lotterying. Sorry if I'm not too like I don't know. It's sort of going back through this legal shit has been not fun.
Well, this and all of Brian's stuff, like, God, you've been put through hell this summer.
Well, not as much as Brian.
Well, obviously no, but still.
It's kind of like
we can't expect you to be
kind of like taking a final exam for a 300 level class.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So one of our winners is Sevi, who I believe won the Wiener Prize. So congratulations, Sevi, on the Wiener Prize. For everybody who isn't part of the Discord, the Discord participants can earn points for participation in the Discord. And we have one draw that's just for the people who've earned points in the Discord and have achieved the rank of Wiener, which is a rank that you can achieve.
Wiener, chicken dinner.
So, Sevi, please send your address information to topic@badgerpod.com, and I will get that sorted for you. And I think we have one last raffle draw, which we can do just before we leave. So we can do that then. And I want to thank Bart. Aw, thank you, Bart. Well, it hasn't gone through yet, so I might have to revoke those thanks. But and I want to thank Forkhead Owen. He gives us $50. Thank you, Owen. And Sean gives us $5. Thank you, Sean. I really appreciate that. Getting us towards finishing this off. Some people have said that we've got a good chance. I never want to make an assumption about this kind of thing. So far, our opposition has been very interesting to deal with. Lots of stuff that they've said and put in evidence that we have turned around and used as evidence for our case. So I don't want to speculate on why that would be the case. Well, actually, I do. It's because we're telling the truth. And every time that they try to put forward what they're saying, they end up inadvertently proving our point, at least in my opinion.
Well, I can elaborate on that too, because this is something I want. I'm going to go back to that 7 years in hell case again. You get somebody that writes a narrative for themselves, right? I'm the victim, and this has happened to me, and all of these things around it are true, and so on. All right, so they start with the idea that a particular type of behavior that is not harassment is harassment, and they go from there. Everything that they have said, they are expecting a particular type of reaction to, because it suits their narrative. And you get this mindset with some people where they do not consider the possibility that other people don't think the same way of the same set of circumstances and behaviors that they are considering at that moment. So instead of anticipating, instead of playing chess, right? Instead of anticipating all of the potential moves, they only anticipate the moves that they think would be appropriate for us to make and for the judge to make. So they miscalculate very badly when they're dealing with something that they have convinced themselves is real, but in actuality it's not. And I think that's happening quite a bit with this case.
Yeah, that might be the case. I can't really speculate on their motives. I've been racking my brain about all of this. And then Harry just said, you know what, just present the evidence we have. Can't really speculate on what they're doing. Just because it's so like this entire thing is so, there's so much smoke.
Well, I mean, like, you can't even say that they're trying to argue for some grand cause, because if that were the case, then they wouldn't have spent so much time pissing about with little shit the last time the trial was going on just to waste a bunch of time, right? Like, who spends an entire morning of a trial focusing on like a misspelling of the client's name? Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Well, we do have to get the name right. The problem was, well, what was interesting is that during the actual trial, they got it wrong. I don't know. Did you pick that up?
There you go.
When you shuffle your business name around so much, and I'm not saying that there's a particular reason why they had a whole bunch of different business names, and all of the ones except for their actual operating name were very easy to find and public, and very difficult to nail down as to which time period they used them in. I don't have to speculate on that. I think most people can figure out what that is. But when you do that, it's very much like when you make up a story that has a lot of details. You can't keep track of all of the details. At some point, you're going to make a mistake.
Yeah, it does seem a little bit like that.
Well, and it's not like you weren't doing your due diligence in sending lots of correspondence trying to find out exactly the right name. Like, didn't you guys ask it like 3 or 4 times?
Yeah. We actually sent okay, the thing is, this is what happened. When I originally did the contract with them, I signed it online. So there was in my case, there was no physical contract. And I wasn't expecting this shit to happen. So I didn't actually download and print out a physical copy of the contract. As soon as they kicked us out, they attempted to confiscate all of our badges. They removed us from the website, and they locked me out of my contract with them. So I didn't actually know the entity on the contract. All I had to go on was my PayPal receipt and whatever entities we could find on the web. So that's what we went with. So we would send something out to that entity, and we would receive a message back, nope, that's not us. So we would have to amend our claim each time. And each time, incidentally, it was the same lawyer. So the legal firm basically represented all of the legal entities surrounding the Calgary Expo.
That's because they're all one person.
Yeah, because it's all one person. So we had to, and each time we got the name wrong, we had to file a new amended claim, which was additional cost, additional time. And then also when we got to apparently the judge thought we were fucking around or something, because he didn't seem to be very charmed by how much we had to change our claim. And each time it was just an additional mess. And
well, I love how you got all the shit for quote unquote getting it wrong, they were the ones that were getting it wrong in the first place and saying, "Oh, sorry."
That's because it's their supporters that were tossing all the shit.
Yeah. The hilarious part of all this is during one of the proceedings, the lawyer or the opposing counsel didn't get the name right, and so he had to amend it. He sent a letter to us and he said, "Okay, well, this is the actual name." And what happened was all of these freaking changes, and all of these changes, Harry's secretary made a mistake on the front page, not the actual claim itself, but the front page that gets faxed in. And that's not all of the whole thing, because we had to do the summary dismissal, but they were making endless claims, endless hay out of that. And then during part of the actual proceedings, during the trial, the opposing counsel actually showed a document in which they had made a mistake on their name, because there's been so many goddamn names. And so he had to show this, and finally the judge seemed to be more on on our like started to wake up to this, because he's like, oh, well, wait a second, so this is the name of it, and the council's like, oh no, actually, yeah, that isn't the name of it.
Yeah, that convinced the judge that it wasn't our fault that we had the name wrong. Like the judge didn't really take a side. All he did was deal in logic and reason and law and rational arguments. But it's very difficult to not look askance at someone arguing you should have gotten the right name if he can't get the right name.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the lawsuit is through Feed the Badger. Let me just double check to make sure you can access everything, because, and by the way, there's some additional bullshit going on with the fundraiser because I set it up differently. If you are considering becoming a patron and you want your first month to go towards this legal fundraiser, I set it up so that you can do that. But it's adding some interesting stuff in the back. And if you're worried about the subscription, there is no actual subscription. That's fake. And I'm sort of stuck with it now because if I change anything, WooCommerce will just vomit all over me. Not literally, almost literally, but not literally. So it is at feedthebadger.com. If you want to go directly to it if you're watching any of the YouTube videos, you should have a little eye in a circle on your top right when you go over the video. And if you click that, it'll take you directly to the fundraiser in question. And if you aren't on YouTube, then just go to feedthebadger.com. It's been a slog. It's been interesting. There's even more crazy things that the opposing counsel has done. Just a little bit odd. I'm understating it when I say it's a little bit odd. Just bizarre. Like head scratching stuff that he's done, and it's hard to get into his head, and it's almost like unnerving. Like you're watching the sack and there's something in it, and you're like, what's in the sack? What's moving the sack?
We can't know, Batman.
Like there are some things he's done that are actually abnormal, even in civil suits, and they're abnormal because of their ability to be effective, and because it'd be like if you went over to when you were a kid, if you went over to the neighbor's house to ask the neighbor for permission for something, your parents would wonder what was wrong with you if you went to ask your neighbor permission to do something that your parents had authority over. It's that weird. Or if you went to the oven to get ice cubes, it's that weird.
It is.
Maybe he's playing 1D chess. 0D chess.
I don't know, either that or he's playing Cthulhu style chess, right? Interdimensional chess, because that's the only. If he has a law degree, he
might be playing divide by zero degree chess.
I don't know.
I want to get what Karen's about to say. He's got a law degree. You would think
that he's intelligent enough to realize that some of the things that he's actually done have. I don't know whether it was from carelessness or what, right? Or he just believed what his clients were telling him and didn't bother to read through any of the documentation.
I was going to read my affidavit that I sent in. Oh, but I didn't ask if Harry could do that. You know what? We'll be doing another fundraising stream on the legal stuff. I'll read it then. It's pretty late. My back hurts.
But I want to. When you look at actually some of the things that they have done, that it would literally be like if Lucy Ducoteur had testified, that after Gian Gomeshi allegedly assaulted her, she avoided anything to do with him, and then she herself entered in all of the evidence Gomeshi used against her. It's very bizarre.
Yeah, actually, I will say one thing. We've hypothesized, actually Harry's hypothesized, that the best thing that they could do is not show up at all. Of course, he would, because he's our counsel, right? But I think actually Harry's pretty good at being really neutral. and just being like, you know what, can't say that, can't speculate on that, don't know what's in his head. And if he says that a lot of their case sort of suggests they might be better off if they just didn't show up, considering the multiple direct contradictions in some of the affidavits so far from them. Like, is anybody hearing me?
Yes.
Like, for example, like the most egregious is saying that I applied, I've infiltrated the convention, or alleging that I infiltrated the convention under a false name, and then submitting into evidence a contract that shows Honey Badger Brigade as the company and honeybadgerbrigade.com as the website on the contract. Like, that's just, I'm just squinting at that. I'm like, is this some sort of, is this 5-dimensional legal chess? Or?
Yeah, interdimensional legal chess. It's like, because
sub-dimensional.
their affidavit says we couldn't have possibly known that she would be there representing the Honey Badgers, as she misrepresented herself on her application for a booth. And then to demonstrate that, they entered as exhibits her application forms and all of the correspondence that all shows that it's Honey Badger Brigade, Honey Badger Radio, Honey Badger Brigade, Honey Badger.
I didn't have access to this. I didn't have access to the contract.
She would not have gotten that without subpoenaing it. So it's like, why did they do that? Like, I'm just absolutely flabbergasted.
At the very least, they have complete access over the freaking form. Why didn't they just fake it? You know, well, I mean, that could have really screwed me.
Yeah, if they could be certain that you really didn't have it, but they might not have been able to. And the other thing is, if they faked it and it was obvious, like there were marks or differences that demonstrated that it was fake, that would get them in a huge amount of trouble. Or they might just not be that smart.
Why would they submit it in the first place? She had no access to it. She would have had to subpoena it.
My guess, they didn't read it. They had a narrative. This is what I'm telling you guys. And this is, I've seen this before.
Carelessness.
They had a narrative. I was in court. Actually, no, the day that happened, I was waiting at home. But I was part of the group that was waiting for the information from court on a day when the vexatious litigant I keep talking about had accused her ex of a crank phone call, essentially harassing phone calls, right? And she did this twice, and on both occasions she claimed to have a recording of the call. On one of those occasions, they went through an entire answering machine tape, and there was no call on it. They went back and forth, and finally the prosecutor was like, all right, well, we can't do anything. You don't have the evidence that you said you had. And the other time, it was a different person's voice. And it was not just different. It was obviously different. It was a different tone, timbre, and accent. And this is something that, you know, the narrative is stronger than the memory. They make a claim. They say, this happened. They don't look at the evidence. They don't pay attention to the evidence. They don't think about the details of the evidence. They think about the narrative. And then they gather the things from the time period that they think are evidence. And it turns out to have details that completely contradict the narrative, because the narrative is a lie. And that's what we're dealing with.
I'm actually sort of thinking that maybe that's this case here. I almost, like, insofar as I can sort of feel sorry for them, at the same time as dreading and being frustrated by this whole situation. It's like, seriously, are you this divorced from reality that you would submit this to support the direct opposite of what it supports?
You're a more sympathetic person than I am. I'm
I
looking at
am.
this. I honestly, I'm looking at this from a perspective of I've been involved in things like the expo, but very unlike the expo. My area where I grew up, the men in my family were all involved with the administration of the local county fair. And it's a big thing. It's a week long, big deal, and it's got all kinds of details, and it's very similar in operation to an expo. There's exhibitors, there's vendors, there's attendees to deal with, there's shows, there's all kinds of stuff like that to deal with. And the last thing administration for a deal like that should want to do is single out an individual participant who is participating because they love the thing that is themed around. You wouldn't want to take a farmer and single them out, that maybe they're an exhibitor, or maybe they're a vendor, or maybe they're kids in 4-H and bringing an animal. You wouldn't want to single that person out and just smash them because they're different. You don't like something about them. You want to make it an all-inclusive environment where you have to actually do something rotten to get kicked out, drunk and disorderly and attacking people, or some such thing like that. Not this person is wearing the wrong clothes, or this person is backing the wrong political candidate or whatever. And by the way, these county fairs are centered around agriculture. That is what they are for. In the commercial building of every county fair, there are booths for political parties, and nobody has a problem with it. That's been around forever. And yet, here in this environment, you had a group of people who feminists profess to want to make the environment of nerd and geek culture accommodating to women. And yet, what did they do? They ganged up on a female comic creator who wasn't depending on anyone else to help her. She was just engaging in the culture and engaging with an audience. And because you oppose censorship, of all things, you would think that nerd and geek culture would unite in opposing censorship, because censorship is an attack on creators. And they ganged up to try to smash you. I don't have any sympathy. I have no sympathy at all. If they trip over themselves throughout this entire thing and fall flat on their faces and humiliate themselves, I have no sympathy. They are asking for that every step of the way, by lying and by ganging up on and bullying the very type of person they claim to support. So I guess that's the limit of my compassion. I don't have sympathy for somebody who hits themselves in the face with the hammer that they're trying to hit someone else with.
I know. It just is, I guess, it seems like it'd be a really lonely place not to be able to connect with reality and just be living in your own sort of solipsism. The thing is that, but the thing is, I haven't changed since you remember the live stream that we did after the panel, and Sage and Mike were calling, they were essentially saying that the editor of the Mary Sue at the time was a C word, shall we say. And I was saying, no, let's not call her that. She's not the person who did this, has done anything. And then she did this, or allegedly did this. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that to me, I look at the whole picture of that particular publication, and because having to go back through it for evidence was really distasteful. That's all I can really. That's the nicest thing I can say about it, and it's disappointing. That's the other nicest thing I can say about it. And I understand why guys would call somebody who runs something like that the C word. Um, we're not talking about cranberries. But I don't know, an actual, an actual publication for women would spend more time encouraging and celebrating and less time bitching and whining. And that's,
Well, yeah, I would think so too, but I don't think that it's about that. The
yeah.
great irony is I think that we care more about women than feminists do.
Well,
Um,
I think that's pretty nailed. I think that's we've pretty much set that in stone over the last few years just by talking about the way that female accountability contributes more to female success than being propped up by other people ever could.
It certainly feels like we respect them more. I mean, like, even if you can debate about treating people better or whatever, but like, I think that we respect them more just by virtue of not seeing them as victims in everything that they do, and saying that women actually have agency and that maybe they should take responsibility because they are functioning adults rather than children.
yeah, and well, but the other thing is that when feminists sort of reduce women down to, this is something that I've been thinking about. You can't, when you're focused on prioritizing what you share with everyone else in your group, you really can't look at how you're different, or you can't prioritize achievement. I mean, to a certain degree, I think both men and women should be able to be recognized for having innate values and innate strengths and weaknesses. But at the other hand, we should also value for people for how they use those strengths and weaknesses, how they differentiate themselves from their group to achieve. And feminism is literally destroying women's achievement by making them focus on being a woman as being the most important aspect of their being, rather than focus on how they can differentiate themselves from other women. Why would you achieve? The most important thing about you is being a woman, and they're actively harming you from differentiating yourself in any kind of achievement. Like, feminists don't seem to be celebrating women achieving, or they try to co-opt the achievement as an aspect of feminism. So it's almost like this bucket of crabs principle. Like, if you achieve as a woman, that's really our achievement as a group of women. That's not your own personal individual achievement. It's ours.
Well, hell, they're not even supporting being a woman. They're supporting being a woman in the way that they see fit. So it's like, if you're a woman who wants to be a stay-at-home mom and raise really great kids, then you're not a good woman in their eyes half the time. No, you have to go into STEM and get a high-powered career and stand on men's backs with your high heels as you become the CEO of your own tech company.
But if you are a woman who's a stay-at-home mom and raises kids and doesn't get a job and doesn't get a degree and doesn't actually do what a lot of women who are stay-at-home moms do when they have kids and become involved in your community, so you have no network, you have no anything to trade on, and then you cheat on your husband and leave him, he owes you money because you didn't better yourself when you were part of the marriage, and now that you've left, you have nothing to trade on and you can't support yourself. That's the feminist idea. If you ask him to support your lifestyle choice of doing nothing for a living, and then you leave him because you're an asshole, since you're helpless now, he owes you money. Not because that's the situation. About 70% of divorces are initiated by women, and
okay, can I just
many
get
of them
in here?
cheating. So it's
I
not
want to
that they're
just add
give me
something
let me finish, and then I'll let you go on. So it's not that they're asking that if a man demands a woman does that and then leaves her, that for a time he helps her get back on her feet. No, it's she makes this decision and then leaves him and takes the kids, and suddenly he owes her money for that. That's bullshit.
Okay, I just wanted to get in here and just say, even if you are the high-powered woman who has her own tech company, if you do not ascribe your success to feminism, you are also apostate. If you say, no, actually, I did this on my own, as a person who created something new, there was no one there to give me a hand up. Therefore, how could feminists guilt a man who didn't exist? Because he didn't, if I'm creating something new, there's nobody there to give you a hand out or a hand up. So if you're creating something completely in the void, you have no one to appeal to. So a woman who does actually create a tech company, how could she will be expected to tie the feminism, to say, oh yeah, feminism enabled this to happen. This is actually the achievement of feminists, not my achievement. And if she doesn't, guess what happens? She will be publicly crucified by feminists.
That's why they hated Margaret Thatcher.
You know, and the thing is that it's impossible for feminism to actually help a woman who wants to create something new, because all feminists do is identify the nearest male and say, hey, give that to her. And if there's nobody, if it's new, there is nobody there. You are the first person on that territory. There is no one to appeal to say, hey, could you build me a tech company so I can take it from you? You know, there's nobody there. If you build it from the ground up, it is because of your own individual force of will. And feminism cannot take credit for that and should not take credit for that. But it will demand that any woman who starts from the ground up and builds her own tech company lay that tech company at feminism's feet like some goddamn offering to the goddess empress of all. And abdicate, say, no, that wasn't my own personal willpower. It wasn't my own personal energy or vision that created this. It was actually feminism that did it. Or she'll be publicly crucified, and feminists will do everything in their power to destroy her and her company. Thank you, feminism! You are definitely a force for good for women.
The ultimate co-opting.
Yes.
And instead of cultural appropriation, it's accomplishment appropriation. And you know, they've done that throughout history too. Every woman who has ever done anything remarkable, feminists lay claim to her achievement. They love to lay claim to the achievements of women who are already dead because they can't contradict them.
They piss all over it.
Well,
it can't be the individual woman's own individual strength that did it. It has to be attributed back to feminism. So even if women do exactly what feminists want them to do and achieve, if they don't lay that achievement at feminist feet, the sisterhood will go into their achievement and it would be a shame if someone were to destroy this achievement. Be a shame if someone were to take this thing you've built up and start smashing it. Be a shame if someone were to get a blowtorch and start to tear it down and put it on fire. That's what they do. And then they wonder, they sit back and they blame their own protection racket. They blame the effects of their own protection racket on women, on the patriarchy.
Yep. Everything gets blamed. Feminism, one of the reasons why I call feminism a religion is because they do use patriarchy theory to make men God and the devil. Everything comes from men. Therefore, for not giving women everything feminists say now that they want, even though 20 years ago they said they wanted the opposite, men are evil. That's feminism right there. Men are God and the devil according to patriarchy theory.
And that alone should piss people off from feminism. The fact that it presumes to take away women's individual achievement. And why the fuck would you achieve anything if it's not going to reflect back on your individuality? Like, why would you do that? I'm not trying to achieve for. Anyway, if that alone should make people be like, you know what, go fuck yourself. You don't deserve, your protection racket doesn't deserve responsibility for women's own individual effort. It wasn't feminism that made women who do great things do great things. It was them. It was in them. It was them. And you don't deserve a single iota of credit, because all you have ever done throughout your entire existence is reduce women down to victims and cry to the nearest man to save them. And you want to prove me wrong? Then prove me wrong. Show it. Show me something feminist that isn't appropriating women's achievements for feminism or reducing them down to victims. Show it to me. I'm sorry, this pisses me off.
And they'll never be able to do that.
Alone.
In fact, they'll deny some of the very things that help girls grow into the type of women who go forward and achieve. For instance, during their childhood, I will bet you that most of those women had a parent who held them accountable. And more likely than not, it was dad. You know, not that moms don't do that. There are many great moms out there that do that. But having both parents means that it's more likely. And having dad means that it's even more likely. Because dad was more likely taught that accountability when he was growing up. You know, and this is something that, like, for me, the times that I fell on my face are times that I didn't follow the lessons that my dad taught me. And the way that I got back up was to remember the things that my dad taught me. And the toughness that both of my parents displayed. And that's what got me back on my feet every single time. And looking to my family, looking to my husband for an example. You know, looking to the people around me who were accountable. Feminists can't acknowledge stuff like that. They absolutely cannot acknowledge stuff like that. Because if they acknowledge stuff like that, their victim narrative disappears. And while I've got the mic, I'm going to read off. We have 2 super chats. Hoki Bukisa gave us his traditional 420. And says, "What's in the box?" Which has to do with the looking at the bag that's wiggling and not knowing what's in there. Joey Jojo says feminism is... Joey Jojo gives us $2 and says feminism is a hate group and it needs to end. I would agree with that 100%.
All right, I want to thank Michael, the lycanthrope, for $15, and he says, earned 20 CHF by selling hot peppers to a restaurant. Welfare department said, use the money at your discretion, so I'll donate. Well, thank you. Good luck with your hot peppers, huh? Hot pepper business. Okay, and then I want to thank Mitchell, Safe Demon. And you have a really cool avatar, Safe Demon, by the way. I like it. And then this is literally all my, this is from Random Dinosaur. And no, I won't. Okay. This is literally all of my spending money till Christmas bonus. Hope it helps. The name you will pronounce wrong. P.S. Thanks for replying to the email. Wyatt Badger question not video. It was unnecessary, but nice to see it was read. No problem. And Michael gives us $100. Thank you, Michael. And yes, your urinal is lovely. Field. Okay, I'm not going to say any more of that. I might not be a rich dude, but I won't surrender, and neither will we. Thank you. And that's $5 from this individual who will not surrender, and neither will we. And then Bart, the amount went through. It's $250. So thank you, Bart. Just so you guys know, Bart is a patron who has substantially contributed to us, and he's currently dealing with brain cancer. So I really appreciate that donation from you, Bart. Oh, I hope I was supposed to actually mention that. Shit. Sorry. There are a lot of people called Bart, by the way, so thank you, Bart. So is there anything else that we want to cover?
Well, we have a question for you from the chat. Guy Moore wants to know if there are any updates from your garden.
Which garden?
I have
You mean-
no idea.
Oh, we actually didn't plant this year because we were preparing to go to Australia during the usual planting season. Although Jonathan's mother did plant, and there was a significant amount of potatoes, I believe. Our psycho suicide killing, no, not suicide squash. We have this squash that are like super aggressive. They're very aggressive squash, and they go over everything. And we tried to grow some melons, and the squash sort of ate the melons because they're
Squash
super
will do
aggressive.
that.
Super aggressive.
Squash will do that, especially zucchinis. Zucchinis are the worst of the squash.
You really got to watch out for squash too, because
Trick or treat.
you can get, if you plant two different types of squash in the same garden, you can lose both of them. They will crossbreed, and you will get inedible gourds. It really sucks. I've made that mistake myself. We have the Forced Meme gave us $5 and says feminism will die at the hands of fully autonomous sex robots. I would like to believe that that's not what it would take, first of all, and second of all, that it would work. The problem is feminists are already on the attack with regards to sex robots. And I've read a few different stories, the most disturbing of which is they are now messing with the personality programming of sex bots to force a response on the sex bots to direct the behavior of men so the sex bots orgasm more for nice guys. Now that betrays. Karen, stop. You gotta let me finish this. That betrays an awareness of something.
Karen, put your
they
headphones
deny.
on.
Feminists are demanding that these sex bots be programmed to orgasm more for guys that are nice. Why would they do that if they don't think guys care about a woman's response during sex? If they don't think the man's focus during sex is on pleasing the woman? If they don't think that response is a reward for the man and is what gets him off? Not the physical stimulation, not just looking at the body parts, but actually getting a demonstration that the person he is with is pleased by what he has done. That the person that he is with is affectionate towards him, loves him, and is turned on by him.
Can I just, I don't know if sex bots are actually going to, the more I look into this, I don't think that sex bots are going to be a solution. Just like I don't think games were a solution or virtual reality is a solution.
Or the artificial womb. No.
Yeah, but think about that this is such a revelation from them, and they don't even know they did it.
I know exactly what you're talking about, Hannah. But everything they do is a revelation. Like they
contradicts everything they have said about objectification. Everything, 100%.
Yes. They created this patriarchy that appeals to sentiments in men that they say don't exist. Or they create a narrative in which they say, well, these sentiments don't exist in men. Oh, by the way, could you please do this for me because of your sentimental attachment to women? Jesus Christ.
Just imagine for a minute. Imagine the hue and cry. You know, if men came out with a dildo that was programmed to only stimulate if you talk dirty to it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Imagine, you know, you're advertising this. You put it online and you put up an article. This is the Talk Dirty training dildo. It will only vibrate. And it'll not fit on the inside if you don't talk dirty to it. Talking dirty to it makes it into the shape and speed of vibration that you program into it. Women would have a fit. Feminists would be on there going, "This is made to force women to please men. This is terrible. How dare anybody create anything?" It wouldn't even matter that it was a thing that you could buy voluntarily. and you could choose voluntarily to not buy. It wouldn't matter that if nobody bought it, it would fail, and the company would have to stop producing it because they wouldn't have any capital. None of that would matter. It would just matter that the woman would have to behave a specific way to get it to perform in the manner that she wanted. And yet they're entitled to demand that a sex bot has to perform a certain way in order to get it to behave in the way the man wants. And they have admitted to knowing that what the man wants is to please the woman and receive a demonstration that he has done so.
Yep.
Agreed.
I wanted to point out that I don't think that I wouldn't oppose sex bots at all. So that's not the issue that I'm getting at. Nor do I think that there should be any initiatives to change the personalities in any way, but the people who are going to purchase them. But here's the thing. I don't think sex bots will function in the social role that women have occupied throughout history in tying men's instincts to the greater work of society. I don't think they're, unless the sex bots were self-aware AI, maybe, but that's not going to happen. AI is okay, continue.
Well, what I think, like, okay, so the idea that, I mean, this is sort of like the idea that the artificial womb is going to change the entire landscape of the sexual relationship between men and women. Because it will make women's wombs obsolete, and therefore women will no longer be valued more highly than men, because their wombs will be now low rent property rather than high rent property. And I don't see that happening. If it ever does happen, it will be a multitude of generations into the future after artificial wombs are created. And what I always tell men who believe that artificial wombs are going to change anything is, I say, how do you think feminists would respond if we had an artificial womb and it became possible for a man who had conceived a child with a woman to and the woman wanted to abort it, to have that child extracted from her womb intact, right? And placed in an artificial womb, gestated to maturity, right? And that man would say, I'm going to take responsibility for this child, right? And then do what women can do now with men, which is seek child support from the other biological parent. Do you think feminists would allow this? Do you think that they would see this as something that is just or fair or reasonable? And do you think society would actually allow men to do this? To say, when a woman chooses to abort my child, I can take possession of that fetus, gestate it to maturity, take custody of it, and then get child support from her. Would the system allow that? And if the system would not allow that, then artificial wombs are not going to change what is.
Here's the thing. Our system is probably not going to last much longer. So whatever our moral scheme we have right now, we're probably going to have to update it to something, or we are going to go kaput. And considering how far it is to fall now as a species, we're probably not going to survive this next fucking collapse.
Well, we'll survive. I think we will survive. There will still be human beings, but the human beings that survive will be the ones that already live without electricity and indoor plumbing and all of those things.
So we'll have a bunch of pygmy tribes in deepest darkest Africa.
And preppers. Well, on that one island, in the South Pacific or whatever that has never had a a non-Indigenous person set foot on it, and when the helicopters come to kind of take a look, they shoot arrows at them, right? Those people still be here. But you know, it's not, and the problem is, and Blithering Genius, who has, you know, he is one of these extremely pessimistic YouTubers, and he's he's super autistic, and he's sometimes difficult to listen to. But he essentially said, you know, collapse is forever at this point, because we climbed up the ladder of easy oil and easy coal, and then we kicked the ladder out from under us, and we require the infrastructure and the systems technology that we already have in order to access any of that stuff. So we're never getting back here. We're never getting back here.
I would tend to agree with that. I mean, aside from and the thing is, I think we should wind it down. But to tie this back into what we were talking about earlier, with Hannah's permission, of course, since she's the one in the driver's seat.
I'm gonna wreck the car, you guys know. Go ahead, but there are a couple of things that I will want to say afterwards. And
yeah,
I'm laughing at Karen's dog in the background.
Also, I'm gonna
she's still going.
I'm gonna call out. We need the final lottery for the peoples. If you're listening, person who does the lottery, Andrew. But what I wanted to say is that I actually think that we won't have a choice about fostering women's self-reliance, because the only way through the eye of this needle is, and it doesn't have to be a lot of women, I don't think, but we are going to have to start recognizing men's vulnerability and how we structure their identities, how we tie their instincts to the greater work of society, or what we've done so far, and that has been women who have done it, women who created the strength behind feminism. We are going to destroy this society. And then once we destroy the society, there ain't no coming back from that. We may still continue to exist as a species, but we certainly will not continue to exist as a civilization, nor will we ever be able to get back to this point. So women have got to step up and start to recognize the vulnerability that men have, and the vulnerability that society has to our choices, and start making some better choices. But I think that, and this is what I find exciting about this whole process, I think that the process of facing this sort of trials and tribulation and the potential loss of our civilization is going to see it in the best outcome. The worst outcome is inevitable, is you know, do nothing, continue to go the way we're going, see the end of our civilization, and see our species basically reduced down to a primitive state until we go extinct. The best solution, and this is the only way the best solution is going to come out, is that a critical mass of women, and that doesn't mean that it has to be a majority of women or even a very large minority, but enough women recognize what's going on and make the effort to oppose it and develop a new way of connecting men's instincts to provide and help for women to a social system that is actually functional for both and reasonable for both. And judging from what I've seen about history, we got some good news about that. Our current system, the one that we live in, the one that conservatives would hold up as being morally superior to any other system on the planet, conservatives in our society would hold up as superior. The reason why our society is more peaceful and more prosperous was at one point in our civilization's history, we cared about the situation for men. Because civilizations are exactly as prosperous and peaceful as how much they will reduce the conflict between men. And it's an obvious equation here. When you reduce the conflict between men, you create a greater level of cooperation between men that results in a greater level of prosperity. When you reduce the conflict between men, you increase the overall peacefulness of your society, which again reflects back on women. They live in a more peaceful, prosperous society. That's why our society is more peaceful and prosperous, because we have a mechanism to reduce the conflicts between men, because we have a moral landscape that reduces the conflicts between men. Of course, right now we have a narrative that's destroying that moral landscape and those traditions. But we can go back to that, or not go back to that, but we can embrace the role that men's rights, men's issues, and caring about men has in creating a functional civilization and establishing a new social order. Because it not new social order, that's going to be misconstrued, but it creates a new way of men to cooperate with each other and to set aside their conflicts. And I think if we do that, we're not just going to see a resurgence of our own cultural tradition. We're also going to see something even better. I think we're going to see women actually spread their wings. And we're going to see something really, really great from that. I know Canna wants to speak, so go ahead.
As far as the disaster end of things that you guys have been describing, I do see something different for the human future, and I'll explain a little bit why. And then we do also have a couple of super chats I'll read. But there is something happening that will throw a monkey wrench into the vehicle by which women currently are sort of using I'm hampered with these children as their excuse to not reach their best level of greatness. And that is, for the last 10 years or so, we've been on the verge of discoveries in multiple types of potential birth control for men. And it's not going to be the artificial womb, it's not going to be sex bots, it's not going to be any means by which men can achieve reproduction that is going to make the difference. It's going to be men having control over whether reproduction happens. When they are able to prevent reproduction from happening without their consent, when they are able to prevent conception from happening without their consent, they will have control over whether or not women are able to use. I have saddled myself with dependents that I can use as an excuse to not work and to not support myself and to not act like an adult. That will take away one of the greatest incentives for men to put up with the redistribution of wealth from people who produce to people who do not. And we will end up in a situation where yeah, Hoki Bukisa says that we'll send a herd around the world, and he's right. But we will end up in a situation where there will be no child born that is not planned. And the reason there will be no child born that is not planned is because you'll be able to say, if you didn't do anything to stop this from happening, you planned that birth. You'll have no more excuses, and you'll have no more situation where women can blame everybody but themselves for their failures. And I think that is, it's not the key, but it is a key to ending one of the biggest excuses that is used in society today for women's victim mongering. Women will have to make something of themselves besides single mom. And I know that this is not an around the world thing, but I'm looking at my country. And in my country, the majority of children of single mothers, that the majority of women who become single mothers every year become single mothers by giving birth out of wedlock, not by getting divorced, not by becoming widowed, not by any other accident. And it's no accident when you give birth out of wedlock in a country where there are 11 different types of choices that you can make between high and labor, or actually custody, going to court for child support. You have 11 different types of choices you can make. that can determine whether or not you end up as a single mom. The single motherhood is a lifestyle choice. Take that lifestyle choice away, and women are going to have to man up, because they won't be able to use it to demand that Uncle Sam step in and force a man to support them. I think that's going to make all the difference in the world.
Okay, I think we should announce the winner of the raffle, and I'm gonna take off here because I'm in pain. Actually, it's Bart. Bart won the raffle. Congratulations, Bart. So thank you for well, actually, I guess you didn't do anything. Thank you for being part of the Discord, and thank you also for what you gave us to get us to the legal situation, the legal court case. All right, I'm going to hand this off to Hannah, and I'm going to depart.
Clearly, Allison, you are good luck. You mentioned Bart, and he wins.
Yeah.
That's just perfect. So, all right. Well,
okay,
I'm going to go ahead.
Good night, everyone.
Night, Allison.
Good night, Allison.
And I'm going to go ahead and read. I've got these 2 super chats. We got $2 from Joey Jojo, who says, if feminists take away sex bots, I will fucking snap. That one, I'm going to say right now, they're not going to. They're not going to try to get rid of them. They already tried using demonization and a few other sort of false criticisms and ridiculous assertions to head off their production, to keep them from happening, and they happened anyway. And they're going to do the same thing they did with the men's movement. They know it's too late now. They know the cat's out of the bag. The pussy's out of the bag. They're not going to be able to get rid of them. It's not going to happen. They'll try to control them. And so it's going to be up to sensible people to make sure that that doesn't happen. And we can, by making fun of every effort, and by pointing out that every time they try to control them, they reveal something about themselves. But then we have Hoki Bukisa gave us $10 and said, forget feminists, I will burn down the factories if we sell sentient sex slaves. And that's a good point. If we make these sex bots actually sentient, then it would be immoral to sell them for any purpose. Yeah, especially if you also give them emotion. That's basically the same as selling a person at that point. I would agree you shouldn't sell something like that. But I think we are a long way off from being able to actually do that. And I think I agree that sex bots aren't going to be the answer. And I'll give you another reason why. Everybody needs companionship with real human beings. And you can't substitute a device, no matter how well it's programmed, for that human companionship. I would say if we start trying to do that, we're going to end up destroying the people that we're doing it for, instead of helping them. And I think it would be better to bring society to the understanding that being different doesn't mean that you don't deserve human companionship. So I'm more for seeing what I mentioned with respect to men having birth control. I'm more for seeing men having control over their reproduction and not being in danger of a relationship just turning them into a walking wallet. I think that would go a long way toward changing the entire dynamic of relationships, and we might see a very, very stark change in how men and women relate to each other, especially once women know that if they aspire to motherhood and adulthood, they're gonna have to earn it and not just steal it. But that said, I think we have kind of talked all of the different topics that we brought up to death. I don't know if anybody else has anything that they wanted to introduce. But if you don't, I think it's going to be time to end the hangout. I don't know, Karen or Prim, Mike, you've been real quiet.
Yeah, that's me for you.
Have you had any thoughts on any of the stuff that we've been saying that you just haven't said? No, I'm not hearing. I can see that Karen is talking and I'm not hearing her. Hang on a second. I'm going to do the hang up and come back thing. Why the fuck that's happening, I don't know. Hang on. I'm back. Karen, try talking again.
I was just saying I have nothing to add. Mike, go ahead. Take it away. Do your worst. Or your best. Or whatever.
Yeah, I have nothing to add either.
Okay, then it sounds like we really are done. So, with that, I would like to thank everybody for listening to our nice long, I think we have had, what, 3.5 hours for this hangout. And I would like to thank everyone who donated and everyone who shared links to all of the hangouts and shared links to the fundraiser. Please continue to share the fundraiser on your social media and let people know who are our fellow MRAs and who are our fellow Gamergate supporters, anybody who opposes censorship, so that we can get to court and fight the good fight. And with that, I'm going to wish everybody good night.